Introduction to the Holy Emperor of Doupo. www.xiaoyuan.com What kind of story will a soul from a blue star bring when it obtains a mysterious pearl in a void and arrives at the Duki continent together? https://www.xiaoyuan.com. Chapter 1. Soul from another world descends to the continent, begins with fire-swallowing beads. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Continent of Duki, Empire of Empires, and Honesty in Ukraine. In a somewhat rudimentary house near the city gate, a boy who appeared to be around 10 years old was sitting cross-legged on the bed. He looked childish, but had already shown some handsomeness. At this moment, the boy's eyes were tightly closed, and his hands made a strange handprint. The boy was now gathering the cyclone of dough and planning to break through the dough. His name was Tianyao, and as time passed, the dough qi in his body began to contract towards the center of the dantian. When it was about to contract, he began to use his soul power to compress the dough qi. When it was compressed, the dough qi rebelled a little, but they were all. The boy was suppressed. I don't know how long it took. Bang! At a certain moment, there was a muffled sound coming from the body. Tianyao opened his eyes, slightly raised the corners of his mouth, and smiled on his face. Then he closed his eyes and began to look inside dantian, only to see a doji cyclone slowly spinning in the center of dantian, looking like the Milky Way in the universe. Not far from the cyclone, there is a gray bead slowly spinning there, surrounded by 4 special runes. These 4 runes each have different shapes and colors, namely sky blue, dark green, turquoise, and black-purple. They revolve around the bead as the center, slowly rotating around it. The bead, rune, and cyclone do not interfere with each other. Tianyao looked at the gray bead and lost in thought. This bead is called the flame-swallowing pearl, and it came to this Duki continent with him. At Blue Star, one day he was shopping in the mall when suddenly a mountain shook and the entire mall began to shake. Many products placed on the counter fell to the ground due to the huge shaking. At this moment, people realized that an earthquake was coming, so many people were frantically searching for an exit. Tianyao was also frantically searching for an exit, but he was unlucky and was about to be far from the mall gate. As a result, he was hit by a person behind him, and the ground shook, causing him to fall to the ground. Just as he was about to get up, a decoration upstairs fell due to the shaking, just like Tianyao's. There was a collision in the back of his head, and he lost consciousness on the spot. When he woke up again, a starry sky came into view. Later, he was surprised to find that his body was somewhat transparent. At this moment, he found a gray bead floating in mid-air in front of him, surrounded by 4 runes. At this moment, Tianyao thought to himself, where is this? Am I already dead, but can a person still be conscious after death? He looked at his transparent body. It should be said to be a soul, a bit tearless, and then looked around. There was nothing else around except his soul and a gray bead. At this moment, the gray bead suddenly emitted a light, and then Tianyao only felt a spinning sensation before losing consciousness. When he woke up, he found that his body was not as transparent as before, but rather a tactile one that looked more real. Tianyao touched his face and chest, feeling the temperature of his body and the heartbeat coming from his chest, which made him feel like he had come to life. At this moment, he realized that his body resembled that of a child aged 5 or 6. Then, some memory images came from the child's mind. After receiving these memories, Tianyao knew that he had traveled through time, but not to the past and future, but to the continent of Duki. Now, he also called himself Tianyao, only a word different from his previous name. Because it's rare to choose a new name. Tianyao's parents are both mercenaries. His father's name is Yuan and his mother's name is Li Hui. The cultivation of these two is that his father is a 1-star master and his mother is an 8-star fighter. 2 months ago, while escorting supplies in the Warcraft mountains, the 2 of them were destroyed by several Warcraft beasts, including a 3rd-level Warcraft. No one in the team survived. However, before his parents left, they left behind 30 gold coins, 2 yellow-level fighting skills, and a yellow-level advanced skill book called Fire Xian Ju. They were prepared to give it to him when he broke through the fighter, but now it can only be inherited by him as an inheritance. With his thoughts returning to his senses, Tianyao withdrew from his inner gaze and opened his eyes. He stood up and stretched his muscles and looked out the window. It was already dark outside, and his stomach had already begun to cry. He decided to prepare something to eat. After he had eaten enough, he would sleep and prepare for tomorrow's cultivation. The next morning, Tianyao got up and had breakfast before leaving. He planned to find a cave in a mountain forest outside the city to successfully cultivate the martial arts left by his parents, and then transfer to other advanced techniques. Moreover, Xiaoyan's family has only been honest in Ukraine for a month now, so advanced techniques will be discussed later. But first, he had to buy some food. This time, not only did he practice martial arts, but he also practiced the fighting skills left by his parents. He bought all the things and spent a total of 1 gold coin. Then, he put the things into the low-level receiving ring and walked towards the city gate. This receiving ring was also left by the male protagonist's parents. After leaving the city, he walked towards the direction of the mountains and forests. After walking for a few hours, he finally walked to the mountains and forests. After finding a cave where he could practice, he set up a camp here. After the camp was completed, he sat down and ate some food to regulate his breath. When it was about time, he sat down and rested. Sitting on his legs, he went through the exercises in his mind and was about to follow the path given by the exercises when the beads in the elixir field trembled. Then a memory that did not belong to him came, and Tianyao only felt a slight swelling pain in his head. However, the swelling pain did not last long before it disappeared. At this moment, Tianyao realized that a technique called Fire Swallowing Mysterious Technique had appeared in his mind, and he was somewhat surprised. He did not expect that there was another technique in the Fire Swallowing Pearl, followed by Ecstasy. I didn't expect this bead to bring me any surprises before, but I didn't expect to pass it back to him. He didn't care about practicing the yellow-level technique anymore, so he quickly checked the Fire Swallowing Mysterious Technique. After reading this technique, he pondered for a while before slowly saying, "This technique is also quite rebellious, but like burning Jew, it can devour abnormal flames." However, this technique has a drawback, which is that he needs to first find a flame to devour and refine before he can practice this technique. Then, the refined flame will be the main one to devour other flames, just like burning Jew. Another difference is that the burning technique is initially a low-level yellow-level technique that requires devouring a different flame for leveling up. The level of this technique is determined by the level of the first flame devoured. If the first flame is a different flame, this technique can go directly to the heavenly level. Alas, if I were a member of the Flame Clan, that would be great. This way, I can quickly cultivate this technique, but now I can only practice the yellow-level technique first. So he began to practice according to the operation method of the Fire Xian technique, and as he practiced, the fighting qi around him was sucked in by a force of attraction, and began to rush towards Tianyau's body. When the fighting qi entered his body, Tianyao followed the path of the technique to move the sucked fighting qi along the tendons and meridians for a large Zhou Tian, and then entered the Dantian along the tendons and meridians, merging into the Do Qi cyclone. After that, he continued to operate in a systematic manner, and unconsciously, a day quietly arrived. Tianyao opened his eyes and felt the fighting qi in his body. However, the fighting qi did not increase much, and he wanted to reach the mid-star stage. It will take some time. Now I can only take it slow. After my thoughts return, I will start preparing dinner for my already protesting belly. After dinner, I think I will start practicing the fighting skills left by my parents tomorrow, and then start tidying up and getting ready to sleep. The next morning, after finishing breakfast, Tianyao sat down and took out 2 fighting skills to practice. Both of these fighting skills belonged to the yellow level. The yellow level advanced fighting skills, Explosive Flame Fist, and the yellow level advanced body method, Funnying Step, were found by his father's luck in a cave. He placed these two fighting skills on the ground. Han Tianyao looked at them and decided to practice Explosive Flame Fist first, because they had the same attributes. It should be easier to practice. He put away the other fighting skill and opened the Explosive Flame Fist fighting skill, starting today's cultivation. 2 days later outside the cave, Han Tianyao was currently practicing martial arts. He first mobilized the fire attribute Fighting Qi in his dantian to enter the meridians, and then began to operate according to the movement route of the martial arts. He gathered the Fighting Qi into the meridians in his arm, then clenched his palm into a fist, and then gathered it through the arm muscles to the fist. Finally, he punched again, but there was no reaction after punching. Han Tianyu looked at his own fist, then picked up the martial arts book and read it again. After reading it, he recalled to Yi that there was something wrong with the fist he just punched, so he should correct it in time. After all, no martial arts book has been so easy to practice. For him, it's already great to be able to do this step for the first time. Take it slow, don't rush. The next step is a long and boring life of cultivation. 3 months later, in a mountain forest outside the city of Urumqi. A figure shuttled back and forth in the forest, and behind him appeared 3 remnants. This was Han Tianyu, who was practicing the shadow-splitting step. Soon, he stopped in front of a tree that was only 2 people thick and hugged each other. He clenched his fist with his right hand and shouted, "Explosive Flame Fist." After speaking, he punched with one punch, and a flame of red fighting energy wrapped around Han Tianyu's fist, hitting the trunk of the tree. With a loud bang, the big tree that the 2 of them hugged broke apart in response. Han Tianyao saw the result and nodded with a smile. It was very good. The results of the more than 3 months of cultivation were very satisfactory to him. Not only did he master both of the fighting skills, but he also reached the early stage of the 3-star Do. This is also the credit of the fire-eating beads. The fire-eating beads can help himself accelerate the absorption of the fighting energy around him, otherwise it would not be possible to cultivate to the 3-star Do within 3 months, and both of the fighting skills have been mastered, which has already completed his goal. It's time to go home now. I've been back before, just to buy food. Now his height has grown a bit. It was 1.4 meters before March, but it's almost 1.6 meters now. Han Tianyao walked up to a towering tree that required 5 or 6 people to embrace. At this moment, the surface of the tree was covered with burnt fist marks. Han Tianyao smiled and then walked towards his cave, where he began to collect things and prepare to go home. After everything was packed up, he walked towards the direction of Wutan, and when he arrived in the city, he walked directly towards his own house. When you arrived at your doorstep, open the lock on the door, then push open the door and lock it, enter the inner room and tidy up. It was getting late outside, and Han Tianyu ate something before falling into bed and sleeping. The next morning, after getting up to wash up, Han Tianyao went to a nearby steamed bun shop to buy 2 steamed buns and eat them. He went to the Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com to eat while thinking about the way to go. Han Tianyu pondered in his heart and thought to himself, in a few days, go to the outskirts of the Warcraft mountain to see if you can encounter a lower-level Warcraft. Let the Warcraft test their combat skills and power, and also improve their practical experience. Even if you can't fight, you can run. With Shadow Step in hand, as long as you don't encounter a 2nd level or a 1st level Warcraft that grows in speed, you should be able to deal with it. Then go buy some food and a dagger, ready to experience some time on the outskirts of the Warcraft mountains. Han Tianyao walked down the street, buying everything he wanted to buy. When he was about to go home, he passed by a mansion and looked at the plaque on it that read, Xiao Mansion. He thought to himself, the Xiao family has been honest in Ukraine for over 4 months now, which means there are about 8 more months left. Xiao Yan's mother is about to fall. Later, Gu Yuan will send his daughter to the Xiao family and let Xiao Yanbai have a wife. Xiao Yan is now 4 years old, and when he starts to cultivate and lay a foundation, he will enter a period of prosperity. It is not until he is 11 years old that the prosperity period begins to fade away. Entering a 3-year period of being laughed at and ridiculed by others, 3 years later, there was still a wave of divorce. Xiao Yan ignored the situation and wrote a divorce letter in front of the young master of Yunlan sect, who was several times larger than his own family. In the end, he even said the second sentence in the sentence, 30 years in the east and 30 years in the west, do not deceive the youth, and made a 3-year agreement. That means I am 6 years older than Xiao Yan, more than 5 years old. Thinking of this, Han Tianyao was about to say, my advantage lies in me. But as soon as he thought of the original owner who said this, he stubbornly held back and glanced at the mansion again. Without much time, he walked towards his own residence. When he arrived home, Han Tianyao prepared everything and entered the Warcraft mountains early tomorrow morning. Chapter 2. Entering the mountains for the first time and encountering second-order Warcraft. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next morning, Han Tianyao began his journey to the Warcraft mountains. His first stop was at Qingshan town, where he entered the outskirts of the Warcraft mountains for training. After leaving the city gate, he headed towards Qingshan town. 9 days later, Han Tianyao finally arrived at Qingshan town. Looking at the small town located at the foot of the Warcraft mountain range, Han Tianyao walked directly into the town and found a restaurant to stay, preparing to enter the outskirts of the mountain range for training the next day. The next morning, Han Tianyao got up to eat something and set off for the outskirts. After arriving at the outskirts, Han Tianyao regained his energy and looked around as he walked. He truly achieved the ability to see 6 directions and listen to all directions, holding his hands tightly. After walking for a while, he saw a slight swaying of the grass not far in front of him in the corner of his eyes. Han Tianyao immediately stopped and stared closely at the grass opposite him, ready to launch an attack at any time. Suddenly, a first-order demon beast, the iron-skin pig, rushed out of the grass and charged towards Han Tianyao. The iron-skin pig's skin was as hard as iron, so it was called the iron-skin pig. Han Tianyao immediately used the splitting shadow step to dodge to the right, and at the same time, quickly strike with the right fist, explosive flame fist, hitting the left rib of the iron pig. The iron pig felt pain and immediately swung its head to the left, intending to use its fangs to attack Han Tianyao's left side. Han Tianyao then uses the splitting shadow step again to retreat. The iron pig, seeing that it did not attack the human in front of him, screamed and immediately ran towards this despicable human, which was bound to tear the human in front of him apart. Han Tianyao uses the splitting shadow step to evade the iron pig's attack. Han Tianyao used the fenning step while using the fire-swallowing bead to absorb the surrounding fighting energy and restore his body's consumption. Not to mention, the speed at which the fire-swallowing bead absorbs fighting energy is much faster than the fire-shen technique. After chasing for a while, Han Tianyao noticed a huge rock not far from his right side. His eyes flickered and he ran towards the rock, maximizing his speed. The iron pig behind him also chased closely, and soon Han Tianyao came to the rock. At this time, the iron pig chasing after him was almost approaching Han Tianyao. Han Tianyao leaped over, stepped on the surface of the rock with his right foot, and then ran up a few steps. Then, he kicked his feet and jumped back, completing a somersault in mid-air. However, the iron pig behind did not react and crashed straight into the rock. Go! Bang! With a loud bang, the boulder shattered and countless small stones spread around. The huge stone wall was also left with a large groove by the iron pig. Han Tianyao immediately bullied himself and stepped forward before the iron pig could react. Before the iron pig could react, his right hand took out a dagger from his ring and stabbed it towards the pig's buttocks. Han Tianyao's dagger hit the iron pig's anus without bias, and the entire blade was inserted into the anus. The iron pig let out a mournful cry. Before Han Tianyao could react, he immediately stepped back with a successful strike, along with the dagger pulled out. The pig's anus was bleeding profusely. It immediately turned around and looked at Han Tianyao not far away, howling in anger. The iron pig was now completely angry, vowing to tear up the despicable human in front of it. So it rushed towards the human in front of it without hesitation. Han Tianyao also dodged in time and occasionally punched it. So, after fighting for a while, there were already several burnt marks on the iron pig's body, especially its anus, which was still bleeding, making the iron pig feel unbearable pain. It had been fighting for so long. In addition, the anus was constantly bleeding, and the iron pig had already shown signs of fatigue and weakness. Looking at Han Tianyao again, there was no sign of fatigue at all. Han Tianyao also saw that the iron pig was nearing its limit and immediately took the initiative to attack, using his shadow step and explosive fist to the extreme. He directly smashed towards the iron pig's face, but before the iron pig could react, it was hit in the head by the explosive fist. With a loud bang, the tin pig flew backwards, and Han Tianyao ran towards it as it flew backwards. Before it could react when it landed, Han Tianyao fiercely stabbed it into its belly with a dagger. Many Warcraft bellies were not as hard as other parts. After the dagger was stabbed in, the tin pig let out another mournful cry. Han Tianyao grabbed the handle of the knife and forcefully slashed it open, causing the tin pig to belch completely. Han Tianyao immediately used a dagger to dig a hole in its forehead and found that there was no magic core inside. He was not discouraged. After all, it was just a lucky idea as expected. At this moment, a powerful suction burst out from the black-purple rune surrounding the flame-swallowing bead, passing through the tendons and meridians into Han Tianyao's palm. Then, through the contact between the palm and the iron pig, the suction was injected into the iron pig's body. Then, it could be seen that the iron pig's body began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a while, the iron pig in front of him was left with a skeleton wrapped in skin. Han Tianyu's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise at this moment. He did not expect that the black-purple rune on the flame-swallowing bead still had this ability. Then, he felt relieved and a hint of surprise flashed on his face. The energy that Dao Fuwen inhaled began to milk out, flowing through Han Tianyao's body's muscles and meridians, and being absorbed by his body, which strengthened his body. However, he did not stay in place to wait, but prepared to return to Qingshan town because he had already harvested a lot today. He will come back in a few days. Thinking of this, he immediately set off and returned to Qingshan town. After walking for less than half an hour, Han Tianyao finally returned to Qingshan town, found his previous hotel, entered his own room, sat cross-legged on the bed, and began practicing martial arts. He began to slowly refine the energy inside his body, feeling the pure energy emitted by the runes, continuously entering his own meridians and flowing throughout his body through them. Han Tianyao now clearly felt that his physical body was becoming stronger, and the fighting spirit in his dantian was rising, reaching a breakthrough point. One day later, when Han Tianyao refined all of this energy, his cultivation level was directly increased to the early stage of the 5-star fighter. At the same time, his physical body was also greatly enhanced, and his soul power was also slightly improved. If he had encountered this tin pig again now, he would definitely not have stood up like before. He would have eaten first, then took a shower to tidy up, and then had a good sleep, preparing to enter the outskirts of the Warcraft mountain range next time. On the third day, Han Tianyao stepped into the outskirts of the Warcraft mountain range again. While he was searching for the first-level Warcraft, a sudden roar came from him. Han Tianyao fixed his eyes on it and his face immediately became solemn. He saw a blizzard monkey not far from his right side, which was over 2 meters tall. A pair of dark blue eyes were staring at him, as if he could attack him at any time. He knew that he had been targeted by this blizzard monkey, and his aura was likely to reach the peak of the second level. Therefore, Han Tianyao immediately ran away. If the first level could handle it, but if it were the second level peak, it was true. It cannot be paid. As Han Tianyao pushed forward with all his might, the chasing blizzard monkey suddenly picked up a stone and threw it at Han Tianyao. Han Tianyao noticed the attack behind him and immediately used his explosive flame fist to counterattack. A loud bang. The stone was shattered by the impact, and Han Tianyao dared not bear it at all. He quickly leaned back, and the blizzard monkey looked at the humans who had escaped from his attack. With a roar, he chased after them again for a while. Han Tianyao noticed the scent of the people not far ahead, and his face lit up with joy. He ran towards the front with all his strength. At this moment, the team ahead also noticed someone approaching from behind. When the Xun'er saw the Warcraft behind Han Tianyao, his face changed and he shouted at the team, "No good, it's a second-order Warcraft, run quickly." After saying that, he ran towards the back. At this moment, Han Tianyao came to a person with only 1 star of cultivation, grabbed it, and threw it at the demon ape behind him. The fighter immediately let out a scream, and Han Tianyao quickly turned to the left when throwing the fighter out. The demon ape was chasing the team, and Han Tianyao was preparing to continue his training. 1 month later, in the Warcraft Mountains, in a certain cave. Han Tianyao was sitting on a stone platform practicing, and his injuries were almost healed. He had been seriously injured in a Warcraft battle before, so he had to find a place to heal his injuries. Today, he is preparing to return to Qingshan town and inquire about the medicinal root of Xiaojia to see if he can find the treasure and learn flying skills. After thinking about it, he immediately got up and walked towards the outside of the cave. He walked out of the cave, identified the direction of Qingshan town, and then headed towards it. Not long after, he heard a roar coming from not far from the left direction. Han Tianyao frowned and ran towards the direction of the sound source. When he was about to approach, Han Tianyao hid his own breath and quietly climbed up a tall tree, cleared the leaves in front of him, and looked towards the scene ahead. I saw a dozen or so people fighting against a Warcraft in front of me. Judging by their clothes, they were probably a group of mercenaries. Most of them were fighters, and only the person who fought against the Warcraft had reached the level of a fighter, which should be around 1 star. Facing them was a first-order Warcraft, Blizzard Ape. However, this Blizzard Ape appeared to be at the peak of the First Order. At this moment, the two sides were fighting hard and evenly, fighting for a while. At this point, the person said, "Animal, is it easy for me to bully you? Today, let this animal taste my unique skills." Skill. After speaking, the man picked up his weapon and released a green fighting spirit attached to his weapon sword. He looked for the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com and shouted, "Wind Blade Dance." Then he swung his sword and a blue tornado appeared, quickly attacking the blizzard monkey. The blizzard monkey let out a furious roar, raised its arms, and smashed towards the ground. A pile of ice spikes emerged from the ground and attacked the blue tornado. However, when the two collided, a powerful energy wave was scattered, spreading in all directions, but ultimately, the wind blade dance had the upper hand. After eliminating the ice sting, it continued to attack the demon ape. The demon ape picked up its huge fist and punched the blue dragon scroll, only to be pulled in by the blue dragon scroll and blown into the air. The dense wind blade was cutting the skin of the demon ape, some areas were cut open by the wind blade, bleeding blood, and some areas only had shallow scars or marks. And that Xun'er was one of the 3 major mercenary regiments in Qingshan town, the leader of the Wolf-Head Mercenary Regiment, Moose Snake. At this moment, Moose Snake ran towards the demon ape. Not far from the demon ape, he suddenly jumped up with his big knife in his hand, ready to strike. As he approached, the Xun'er shouted, "Animal, go to hell." After saying that, the big knife struck at the demon ape, and the demon ape let out a painful scream before falling to the ground. With a loud bang, the demon ape fell to the ground and couldn't get up, already hiccuping. As Moose Snake landed, a figure suddenly ran towards him from a nearby tree. It seemed like he was in front of Moose Snake in an instant. Before Moose Snake could react, he had already prepared his fist to strike with all his might. Moose Snake, who had been a mercenary for many years, instinctively responded not slowly. As the opponent's fist was about to hit his chest, he instinctively raised his hand to block it. Bang! This punch directly caused Moose Snake to fly backwards, and the figure did not pay attention to Moose Snake. It grabbed the body of the demon ape and ran towards the distance, disappearing from sight in an instant. Moose Snake was furious when he saw this and roared, "Kid, no matter who you are, I will definitely kill you." Chapter 3. Swallowing the Demon Ape and Encountering Opportunities. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The figure who ambushed Moose Snake and took away the demon ape was naturally Han Tianyao. After running for a period of time, he used his soul power to explore and did not find Moose Snake chasing him. When Han Tianyao ran towards the cave where he lived, after a while, Han Tianyao came to the cave where he lived and used his soul power to explore the surroundings. After discovering no abnormalities, he sprinkled animal repellent powder on the cave entrance and walked towards the cave. He threw the demon ape in his hand onto the ground and then took off the fabric on his face. When he was fighting for the demon ape, he used the soil on the ground and the juice from the leaves to rub it. Tuo it together and apply it to your face, then tear off a piece of fabric from your clothes and cover your face. This can prevent you from being discovered by the Moose Snake, unless the Moose Snake has high soul power and can see through. For this, he didn't even use his flame fist, purely using his physical strength to repel him. Han Tianyao fixed his gaze on the corpse of the demon ape, and then his mind moved. The black-purple rune emitted a strong suction force, which reached his palm through the meridians. Then Han Tianyao pressed his palm on the demon ape, and the suction force entered his body along the palm. Afterwards, the demon ape began to retract at a visible speed and quickly became a corpse. Han Tianyao then took it away and sat cross-legged in front of a stone platform, using his techniques to refine the energy in the elixir field. 3 days later, Han Tianyao walked out of the cave. At this time, his cultivation had reached the late stage of the 9-star fighter, his physical body had also reached the level of a second-level Warcraft, and his soul power had also improved. He was now preparing to return to Qingshan town to inquire about the medicine collection route of Wanyao Studio, intending to see if he could find the treasure. Thinking of this, Han Tianyao immediately set off and went to Qingshan town. While on his way, Han Tianyao realized that he had been targeted by something, so he quickly released his soul power and found a earth rock bear several tens of meters to the left, which seemed to have reached around 3rd level. Now that the earth rock bear had already targeted him, Han Tianyao's face turned cold. Getting up again, without hesitation, he ran to the right side, increasing his speed to the extreme, transforming into remnants and rushing towards the distance. The earth rock bear roared and chased after him. Han Tianyao noticed the earth rock bear chasing after him and smiled bitterly in his heart, saying, "I didn't expect to be chased again. I was previously chased by the blizzard monkey, but now I'm being chased by the earth rock bear again. Alas, this luck is out of luck." Han Tianyao quickly ran forward, with the earth rock bear chasing after him. Not long after, Han Tianyao detected a river ahead, and his face lit up. He continued to run forward, while the earth rock bear behind him continued to chase. After a while, Han Tianyao had already arrived at the riverbank, and then jumped directly into the water, following the river. The earth rock bear on the shore watched helplessly as its prey disappeared before his eyes, roaring uncontrollably. At this moment, Han Tianyao was drifting along the river and was about to prepare to go ashore. After getting ashore, he used his fighting spirit to dry his clothes and then walked along the river. After walking for a while, a cliff appeared in front of him, and the river fell down along the cliff, forming a waterfall. Han Tianyao stood at the edge of the cliff and looked down. He found that the cliff was only over 100 meters long, and no monsters were found on the riverbank below. Therefore, Han Tianyao decisively jumped down. Put on when Han Tianyao jumped into the water again and was about to come out of the water upstream, he saw a cave entrance on the cliff wall. Driven by curiosity, he swam towards that entrance. As he swam into the cave, there was a bright spot in front of him, so Han Tianyao swam towards that spot. Soon, he arrived at that spot. However, this spot was formed by the light above shining in the water. Han Tianyao swam upwards, and when he swam out of the water, he saw that it was an artificially carved cave with a night pearl providing illumination. After seeing the surrounding rock walls in the cave, Han Tianyao swam to the opposite shore and climbed up to the shore. Looking ahead at the stone steps, he could vaguely see a stone gate at the end of the steps. So he walked towards the steps and towards the stone gate. When he reached the stone gate, he found that it was engraved with various patterns and was incredibly complex. The stone gate was about 10 meters high and 5 meters wide. Han Tianyao walked towards the stone gate and reached out to touch it, feeling a cold sensation from his fingertips. Han Tianyao said, perhaps this was left behind by some strong person, and maybe he could inherit it. Even if it didn't work out, he could still obtain some advanced combat skills and treasures. As he spoke, a flash of light flashed in his eyes, and he couldn't catch up with it. He pressed his hands on the stone gates on both sides and pushed them hard. However, no matter how hard Han Tianyao tried, the stone gates remained motionless. He then thought of something and searched around, but didn't find any mechanism or other. Han Tianyao couldn't help but wonder and said, if this stone gate hadn't been pushed open with a mechanism, what other way could it be opened? It's really necessary to use it. Brute force. Speaking of which, he looked at the stone gate again, touched it with his hand, felt it with his soul power, and then said, this stone gate can actually isolate the exploration of my soul power, and just now I felt it, and I think it's unlikely that my power can knock open this stone gate. In this way, Han Tianyao was lost in thought as he saw the stone gate. He saw that the good things were inside, but he couldn't get them. If it were anyone else, he would be unhappy. At some point, Han Tianyao found that the patterns on the stone gate were numerous and complex, but they were interconnected. No pattern was not connected, just like the muscles and veins of the human body, extending in all directions. Seeing this, he immediately thought of Xiaoyan's weapon, and Xiaoyan's Xuanzhong ruler was full of patterns. And as Xiaoyan injected fighting energy into the Xuanzhong ruler, those fighting energies would spread throughout the entire Xuanzhong ruler along the lines, looking very cool. Han Tianyao's eyes lit up, and he immediately pressed his palm on the stone door, injecting fighting spirit into it. After injecting fighting spirit, the fighting spirit spread along the patterns on the door towards the entire stone door, quickly filling all the patterns on this stone door with fighting spirit. Afterwards, Han Tianyao followed suit on another stone door and pushed forward with force, and the stone door unexpectedly opened. Han Tianyao watched as the stone door opened, his face also showing joy. When the stone door opened to allow passage, Han Tianyao couldn't wait and walked in. When he walked in, the first thing he saw was a passage, which was not long, and at the end of the passage, he could vaguely see a coffin. Han Tianyao walked towards the passage and soon arrived at the place where the coffin was placed. It was just an inner chamber of about 100 square meters, with a coffin in the middle and wooden frames on the surrounding walls. The wooden frames were filled with small jade bottles and scrolls. Seeing this, Han Tianyao couldn't help but feel ecstatic. Immediately, Han Tianyao walked towards the wooden frame and looked at the scroll on it. He picked up a scroll and looked at it. The Flame Wrath Palm was a high-level martial arts skill of the Xian level. Seeing this, Han Tianyao raised his lips and smiled. Then he temporarily put down this martial arts skill, turned his head to look at others, and picked up another scroll on the wooden frame. The Wind Whispering in the Nine Heavens was a mid-level martial arts skill of the Earth level. After a while, Han Tianyao finished exploring the scroll on the wooden frame. Of course, the pills in those jade bottles were all pills, but they had already turned into powder. Later, Han Tianyao looked at the coffin and thought for a moment. After bowing to the coffin, he opened it and revealed the coffin inside. Then, he also opened the coffin board, revealing the body inside. The body had dried up and was wearing a purple robe. There was a ring on his right index finger. Han Tianyao took it out, and his soul power penetrated inside. When he saw what was inside, Han Tianyao was numb. In addition to various levels of elixirs, there was actually a book on soul cultivation and a notebook inside. Han Tianyao stamped the ring with his own soul imprint and found it. The Neji has a full 100 cubic meters. Then he planted the Neji on his right index finger, and put all the scrolls on the wooden frame into the Neji, including the jade bottles. After filling them all, he bowed to the body in the coffin and went forward to cover the coffin lid and the coffin lid separately. Afterwards, he stared at the small stone gate. There was a small stone gate behind the coffin, which was opposite to the entrance. Han Tianyao walked towards the small stone gate and pushed it forward with both hands. The stone gate slowly opened. When the stone gate opened, Han Tianyao noticed a slight tremble from the fireball inside his body. Han Tianyao was taken aback and immediately looked forward. There was a stone platform in front of him, on which was a purple cauldron with 2 ears and 4 legs under the cauldron. The surface was also engraved with strange and complex patterns, and there was a sun in front of it. The pattern is that there is actually a flame floating above the cauldron, but rather than just one flame, it is more like 2, because these flames are black and white in color. The feeling of these 2 colors of flames is that the white flame makes people feel full of vitality, while the black flame makes people feel lifeless, making people feel like death is coming. These 2 flames are intertwined, forming the shape of Yin-Yang Pisces. Han Tianyao looks at this flame, surprised. He said, "If you guessed correctly, this flame should be the 21st ranked Yin-Yang double flame on the strange fire list. But I didn't expect to see it here. As long as I devour and refine this strange fire, I can practice the fire-eating mysterious technique. This cauldron definitely doesn't look like a mortal." Just as Han Tianyao was speaking, the fire-swallowing bead inside his body trembled violently. Han Tianyao also reacted and said, "With my cultivation, if I were to directly devour this strange fire on my own, it would be seeking death. I can only rely on the fire-swallowing bead to help me devour it. With the mysterious and rebellious nature of the fire-swallowing bead, I should be able to tame this strange fire. So, come on." After speaking, Han Tianyao took a deep breath and then his mind moved. Then, a suction force emanated from Han Tianyu's palm. Yin-Yang Shuangyan was affected by this suction force and began to slowly move towards Han Tianyu. At this moment, the flame began to resist, and Han Tianyao could only increase the suction force, but no one could do anything about it. However, at this moment, the flame-swallowing bead suddenly left the body and ran towards the flame-swallowing bead, quickly entering the interior of the flame. However, not long after, the flame-swallowing bead began to shrink bit by bit, and finally the flame-swallowing bead slowly emerged inside. The flame-swallowing bead was slowly devoured by the flame-swallowing bead, and Han Tianyu looking at all of this, he was a little surprised and also a little surprised. Surprisingly, the strange fire was devoured by the devouring fire bead, so he could practice the devouring fire mysterious formula. Surprisingly, he did not expect the devouring fire bead to be able to leave the body, and the strange fire could engulf the strange fire from the inside by wrapping it inside. Zhaozuiyuan.com. Subsequently, the flame-swallowing pearl entered Han Tianyao's dantian again. Han Tianyao immediately looked inside the dantian and found that the flame-swallowing pearl was no longer gray, but black and white. Han Tianyao looked at the flame-swallowing pearl and shook his head, saying, "You really deserve to be called the flame-swallowing pearl." Just as he finished speaking, the flame-swallowing ball released an energy, and Han Tianyao quickly reacted. He immediately sat cross-legged, operated the flame-swallowing mysterious technique, and began to refine this energy. 3 days had passed in the blink of an eye. Inside the cave, Han Tianyao was sitting cross-legged, his eyes tightly closed, and his body was adorned with clothes made of black and white fighting qi. This was the fighting qi gauze, and at this time, Han Tianyao had already entered the realm of a fighting master. Another day had passed, and Han Tianyao slowly opened his eyes with a happy expression on his face. He looked inside at his own dantian, looked at the liquid fighting energy inside the dantian, and then looked at the devouring fire bead. He withdrew from his inner vision and stood up, slightly moving his body. He thought to himself, thanks to the energy of the strange fire, I successfully entered the dosha realm so quickly and broke through to the mid-5-star stage. This technique has also reached the heavenly level, and can devour 10,000 flames in one fire. I have the yin-yang double inflammation strange fire, so I can use this strange fire as the main method to practice the fire-eating mysterious technique. Alright, it's time to leave. Let's digest this opportunity and see if we can become an alchemist ourselves. However, we still need to find that treasure. There are not only medicinal herbs, but no one has discovered them yet. We can use the herbs inside to refine medicine. Thinking of this, Han Tianyao spread his hand and a black and white flame emerged in his palm. The black and white colors intertwined, swimming like yin and yang fish, full of the dual power of life and death. Han Tianyu's mind moved, and the strange fire disappeared in his palm. He looked around and said, "It's time to go." After finishing, he returned towards the way he came. Chapter 4. Obtaining treasures and practicing fighting skills. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After coming out of the cave, Han Tianyao immediately headed towards the direction of Qingshan town. When he returned to Qingshan town, it was already dark, so Han Tianyao entered the restaurant and began to rest. As for the rest, he waited until the next day. The next morning, Han Tianyao started to take out the notes left by the owner of the tomb and read them together. He planned to first understand and comprehend the alchemy notes in the next few days, and then inquire about the medicinal root of Wanyaozhai, hoping to find the treasure. Han Tianyao's interest was not only in the treasure itself, but also in the cave. If it weren't for the luck of the little medical immortal who accidentally discovered it during a medicinal gathering, it wouldn't be long before it could be discovered. There was good concealment. Not only could one learn medicinal refining techniques, but also cultivate, practice fighting skills outside, and improve one's cultivation inside. But it was a win-win situation. For the next few days, he stayed in the store, reading his notes and the beginner's manual for the alchemist. These were all obtained in the tomb. 10 days later, Han Tianyao finally finished reading his notes and manual, and he only understood 10% of them. After all, this is an 8th grade alchemist, and the knowledge of alchemy left by his elderly family is very rich. The rest can only be gradually understood. Han Tianyao's next step is to practice controlling fire, and then refine medicine. Of course, the objects of refining medicine are the flowers and plants. He plans to first use the flames catalyzed by Duki to refine the flowers and plants into liquid. After becoming proficient, he will use some common medicinal herbs to refine medicine. After finding the cave, he will try refining medicine with different fires. So the next day, Han Tianyao began to refine flowers and plants using pots bought from restaurants. At the beginning of the process, these flowers and plants were not unexpectedly turned into ashes due to not mastering the heat. After 4 days, Han Tianyao finally mastered the heat and refined the flowers, plants, and leaves into juice. Then he tried to fuse them again, and after the pill was solidified, he saw a small pill with a bumpy surface. From then on, he used his soul power to control the flame and warm the pill. When the surface of the pill was smooth, and round, Han Tianyao began to prepare to take it out. Soon after, he used the flower pill to take it out. The pill made from grass and leaves was taken out by Han Tianyao with his soul power, and he reached out to take it. He looked at the pill made from those flowers, plants and leaves in his palm and smiled, saying, I should be the first person in the Duki continent to use flowers, plants and leaves to refine pills. Later, he said, tomorrow, the 10,000 medicine studio will enter the mountain to collect herbs. They will definitely recruit mercenaries. When they are about to enter the mountain, they will follow behind them and see if they can find the cave. However, there are more than one gathering place in the 10,000 medicine studio. If they cannot find it this time, they will have to think of another way. The next day, Han Tianyao arrived at Wanyazi and saw that Wanyazi was recruiting mercenaries to enter the mountain at the entrance. However, not many people responded. Han Tianyao did not go to respond. He lay in bed last night and thought to himself, it's better not to be so high profile. Just follow them when the time comes. The recruitment is still ongoing. If little medical immortal were there, the entrance would have been crowded long ago. However, little medical immortal is only around 6 years old now, and I don't know when she came to Wanyao. Han Tianyao looked at the recruitment scene ahead and thought that he might have to wait until tomorrow to enter the mountain, so he decided to go back first and come back tomorrow. The next day, Han Tianyao watched the medicinal team set off towards the gathering site, and he followed slowly from behind. As he entered the outskirts of the Warcraft mountains, Han Tianyao began to release his soul power to explore the surroundings in order to prevent any accidents. At the same time, he used the hidden techniques learned from the Neji to conceal his own breath. So, Han Tianyao continued to follow the medicinal team forward. When the sky gradually dimmed, the medicinal team stopped moving and chose an open space to rest. When Han Tianyao saw them resting in the dark, he took the prepared map to explore the surrounding area, especially the cliffs along the way. More than an hour later, Han Tianyao finally discovered a mountain wall on a steep cliff that was covered by horizontal beams. Regardless of whether it was here or not, Han Tianyao first used his soul power to explore the surroundings, confirmed that there was no one or Warcraft, and began to climb towards the mountain wall with his hands and feet. The cliff looked a bit steep and difficult to climb, but for ordinary people, Han Tianyao quickly arrived at the entrance of the cave. After clearing the trees and weeds in front of the entrance, he used his fighting spirit to turn a tree branch into a flame and ignite it. He then held it in his hand for lighting, and then turned it towards the cave. Walking inside, the cave was a bit deep. Han Tianyao walked for more than 10 minutes and guessed to reach a stone gate, which emitted a light yellow light on its surface. Han Tianyao looked at the stone door in front of him and began to search for the mechanism to open it. Soon, Han Tianyao conveniently touched a small bump in the lower left corner of the stone door. With a strong press of his fingers, a sound of mechanism activity rang out. The stone door slowly moved upwards at this moment. After the stone door opened, Han Tianyao walked inside and saw a huge stone chamber. Several moonlight stones were embedded on the walls around the stone chamber, and the light emitted perfectly illuminated the interior of the chamber. There is a seat in the middle of the stone chamber, on which sits a skeleton that has been around for an unknown number of years. In front of the skeleton is a slightly wide and long blue stone platform, on which 3 neat stone boxes are placed. The stone boxes are also locked. In addition, there are many gold coins pushed in the 3 corners of the stone chamber, estimated to be hundreds of thousands based on the quantity. Seeing these gold coins, Han Tianyao's eyes lit up. He finally had money. What he needed the most now was money. With money, he could buy medicinal herbs, and with medicinal herbs, he could refine them. After all, every alchemist not only had the conditions and talents, but also had to use medicinal herbs to pile them up, just like a sniper in the Blue Star. They were all fed with bullets. After scanning the gold coins with his eyes, when his gaze swept to another corner, his face showed a hint of joy. In that corner, a piece of land was piled up with soil, which was filled with various herbs. Various herbs were planted here, and the air was filled with the fragrance of a herb, emitting a fragrance. Wrap around it. Ice spirit flame grass, purple blue leaves, snow lotus seed, 100 spirit ginseng fruit. Looking at these herbs, Han Tianyao did not immediately come forward to pick them. After all, he would stay here for a period of time. If he were to pick them now, he would have to put them in a jade box, otherwise their medicinal properties would be lost. So let them continue to stay in the soil. He walked towards the blue stone platform, looked at the 3 stone boxes in front of him, looked at the sitting skeleton, bowed to him, and then looked at the key on his right hand. So he went forward to take off the 3 keys, and then took out a yellow scroll from the gap in the bone. Open the scroll and take a look. This is one of the 4 remaining images left by the pure lotus demon saint. Han Tianyao hooked his mouth and used the 3 keys in his hand to open the 3 stone boxes, taking out the contents. First, he collected the wild lion vine and the colorful poison classic into the ring. Han Tianyao took the flying fighting skill eagle wing to a corner and prepared to successfully cultivate the purple cloud wing. After sitting cross-legged, he opened the pitch-black scroll and saw 2 black and chilling eagle wings in front of him. These wings looked small because they were painted on the scroll, but they emitted a faint heat, making them look like living things. Han Tianyao looked at the small character next to eagle wing, black flame purple cloud carving, a 5th-order flying monster. It is said to have the sparse bloodline of an ancient phoenix, and its flight speed is among the top among all flying monsters. It is cunning and ferocious in nature, extremely difficult to capture, and only exists in the Yunzalan area in the southern part of the mainland. This volume of combat skills, also known as Eagle Wing or Purple Cloud Wing, was created by myself and a few friends who spent 3 years successfully capturing a flame purple cloud eagle, using a secret technique to take its wings, and finally forming this volume of flying combat skills for people to practice. This combat skill was drawn with fighting spirit before my death, and can only be practiced by 1 person. Remember. After reading the words above, Han Tianyao began to practice this fighting skill and felt the soul inside. With a curl in his mouth, he moved his hands onto the scroll and gently pressed his soft wings. At the same time, he used the surface runes of the flame-swallowing beads inside his body to devour the remaining soul of the purple cloud sculpture with a strong suction. Then, an energy dissipated from the runes and was absorbed by Han Tianyao's soul. From then on, Han Tianyao's soul improved a bit. When the interference of the remaining soul was gone, Han Tianyao began to practice this purple cloud wing. After an hour, the originally quiet stone chamber began to gradually become turbulent. I saw Han Tianyao with a pair of black and purple wings on his back. As his wings flapped in the stone chamber, Han Tianyao's feet began to gradually lift off the ground, floating in mid-air. Han Tianyao felt the pleasure of flying off the ground, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Is this flying? It feels really good. After experiencing the feeling of flying, Han Tianyao's mood also calmed down. He controlled the purple cloud wing to slowly land, found Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, and other places where his feet touched the ground. He then put the purple cloud wing inside his body, and then put away the skeleton, preparing to find a place to bury it. He didn't want to bury a skeleton in the cave. After leaving the cave, Han Tianyao called out the purple cloud wing and flew towards another mountain. He planned to bury the skeleton on a nearby mountain, which could be considered a small thing he could do for the owner of the cave. Wait for Han Tianyao. After Yao finished processing and returned to the cave, he took the pile of gold coins back into the ring and sat cross-legged in the center of the stone chamber. Then, he took out a scroll of Xian-level advanced fighting skills, Kuang Shi Xian and Xian-level advanced fighting skills, Xian Lei Ji, from the ring, intending to learn these 2 fighting skills in the next period of time. The next day, Han Tianyao flew to a mountaintop and took out the first volume of fighting skills, the Xuanjia advanced fighting skill of Xian Lei Ji. He gathered the fighting energy of thunder at his fingertips according to the movement route, and with 1 click, he could quickly hit the target. After seeing the training route of this Xian Lei Ji, Han Tianyao began to practice. Time flies, and 6 months have passed in the blink of an eye. At this moment, on the outskirts of the Warcraft mountain range, a second-order Warcraft fire flame wolf is searching for food. Suddenly, a finger condensed from lightning energy is shot at the fire flame wolf at an extremely fast speed. Before the fire flame wolf can dodge, it is hit and pierced through its body by this finger. The fire flame wolf immediately receives a box of food, and then a figure flashes out, which is Han Tianyao. At this time, Han Tianyao has reached 1 star of the Big Dipper Master. He comes to the body of the fire flame wolf and skillfully pries open the forehead, takes out the magic core inside, and puts it into the ring. Then put the body of the fiery wolf into the Na ring and bring it back to the cave to make grilled meat. As it was previously discovered that this rune could only devour monsters with higher cultivation levels in order to feed back its energy to oneself, but it was a second-level monster, and swallowing it was useless and would not improve one's cultivation. Therefore, it was better to make it into delicious food. Soon, Han Tianyao returned to the cave. Chapter 5. Initial Alchemy, Returning to Wutan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After returning to the cave, Han Tianyao began to meditate and regulate his breath, rest well, adjust his state, and prepare for the next alchemy. The next day, Han Tianyao took out a roll of elixir called Rebirth Pill, which required medicinal herbs such as Qingling grass and first-order wood attribute magic core. After reading the elixir, Han Tianyao stood up and went to the small medicine garden in the corner to take a look. There was 1 Qingling grass, and he also found 3 first-order wood attribute magic core in the Warcraft mountain range before. He had obtained them from practicing fighting skills and killing Warcraft before. Seeing this, Han Tianyao said, I should be able to refine a rebirth pill. After that, Han Tianyao closed the stone gate and then took out the previous one from the ring. The purple cauldron obtained from the alchemist's cave was placed in the middle of the stone chamber. Looking at the purple cauldron, I looked back and forth and found that it was purple throughout. It was estimated to be 1.7 meters high and 1.6 meters wide, with complex patterns and patterns of the sun and moon printed on it. Han Tianyao saw in his notes that the original owner had a record of this medicinal cauldron. The purple cauldron was named Xun'er and ranked 3rd on the heavenly cauldron list. When he saw this, he was also surprised. He didn't expect that the senior alchemist not only had the difficult to refine abnormal fire of yin-yang double inflammation, but also the 3rd-ranked purple yuan ding on the heavenly cauldron list, which was really surprising. After surveying, Han Tianyao placed all the medicinal herbs of the rebirth pill in front of him, and then threw the flames formed by Duki into the purple abyss with his hands. He temporarily did not use the abyss of fire. After all, even a first-grade alchemist does not use the abyss of fire to refine medicine. So, it's better to use the abyss of fire after mastering Duki fire to refine pills. As Han Tianyao waited for the flames in the purple abyss to continue burning fiercely, he was about to inject a bit of wooden fighting energy into it. At this moment, the flames that had just been boiling and burning inside the cauldron suddenly quieted down. Han Tianyao was not surprised to see this, as it was the 3rd-ranked medicinal cauldron on the heavenly cauldron list. Without some auxiliary ability, he would not be able to make it to the heavenly cauldron list. So Han Tianyao began to send the green spirit grass into the cauldron, carefully controlling the flames, and using his soul power to perceive the movements inside. After a while, through his soul power perception, he knew that the green spirit grass had extracted a liquid body. Han Tianyao immediately took it out and prepared it early. In the jade box, Han Tianyao took a deep breath and picked up the animal core placed on the side and threw it into the cauldron to start refining. During the process of refining the animal core, he did not control the flame properly, resulting in the scrapping of one core. Han Tianyao was not angry either, so he picked up the second core and threw it into the cauldron to continue refining. This time, he had some small experience compared to before. After refining for a while, he finally succeeded in transforming the animal core into liquid, afterwards, the already refined Qingling herbal liquid is sent into the cauldron for fusion. This is the most difficult part of the true alchemy process, and any carelessness can lead to failure. During fusion, Han Tianyao injects a strand of wood attribute fighting qi into the medicine to increase the success rate of fusion. Not long after, upon realizing the successful fusion, Han Tianyao began to condense the pill. After solidifying into a young pill, he used flames to bake it. When the surface of the potholes and pits were baked by flames, they gradually became smooth and even. After a period of baking, the surface of the pill had become smooth and even. At this point, the pill had already been refined. Han Tianyao thought to himself and used his soul power to take out the pill through the air. He took it with his right hand and opened his palm to see a thumb-sized pill appearing in his palm. Looking at this pill, Han Tianyao packed it in a jade bottle and saw that there were still some remaining medicinal herbs. Then, he took out 2 first-level earth attribute magic cores and a ghost herb from the Na ring, intending to refine a spring revival pill. Due to the fact that there was only 1 ghost herb this time, Han Tianyao needed to be extra cautious. He adjusted his state first and then began to extract the medicinal herbs. However, there were no issues with this stage, and then we went on to the fusion step. However, everything went smoothly afterwards. When the finished product came out, Han Tianyao smiled and said, "I can now be considered a first-class alchemist." After speaking, he put the spring in his hand and put it into the collection ring with the purple yuan ding, then began to meditate and ponder. He said, now that his cultivation has reached the level of a great master and a first-class alchemist, this experience has exceeded expectations. It is time to return to Wutan City. After all, Xun'er will soon come to the Xiao family, and Xiaoyan will make a move to touch Xun'er's room in the middle of the night. I have to stop Xiaoyan. The advantage of this is that if he becomes enemies with Xiaoyan in the future, he can have fewer enemies. However, if he does not want to become enemies with Xiaoyan, there is also a way to prevent him from burning the dungeon, or to help Medicine Dust recover his body through a trade in 3 years. Please help him safely deliver Yunlan's sect when we make an appointment, and it would be great to be friends with Xiaoyan. After all, having one more friend is much better than having one more enemy, and Xiaoyan's character is also good. The reason for doing so is just in case. I have no intention of Xun'er. Xun'er is not as good as Medusa or Xiaoxian. If not, it's okay to have Yunyun. However, before that, you need to go to the Black Rock City's Medicine Refining Guild to register as a Medicine Refining Master, and then go to Wutan City. After finishing speaking, I went to prepare and took away everything I had taken. The medicine in the field was all packed in a jade box and placed in a storage ring. Then I walked outside the cave, closed the stone door, and went to the 10,000 medicine studio to see if I could buy a medicinal herb. Unfortunately, I only found 1 fire demon leaf. But just as Han Tianyao came out, he found a girl outside who looked like she was only 5 or 6 years old. The girl looked a bit disheveled, with some dirt on her face and some worn-out clothes. Han Tianyao didn't pay much attention at first, but when he came to her, the dark green rune on the surface of the fire-eating pearl lit up for a moment. Han Tianyao was also stunned for a moment. Then he looked at the girl and used his spiritual power to explore. When he found a short gray thin line on the girl's belly, he was also surprised. When he talked about the little Doctor Immortal in the cave before, he didn't expect to meet him at this time. However, looking at her, he should have walked all the way to Qingshan town from where she used to live. The little Doctor Immortal was accidentally eating a poisonous plant. The unlucky poison body erupted, causing the original place of residence to become a dead place. Han Tianyao looked at the little girl in front of him and didn't say hello. He continued to walk outside, took out some food and put it in her hand as he passed her, gave her a smile, and then walked towards the direction outside the town. Han Tianyao didn't come forward to say hello. It's not the right time yet. Firstly, it's inconvenient. The little medical immortal is still young, and if he takes her away now, his future plans will be disrupted and he will have to take care of her, which is a bit troublesome. Secondly, he still has to cultivate his fighting spirit and skills. How can he cultivate with her? He is not the future leader of the poison sect and can be a thug. Thirdly, if he takes her away, there will be no future little medical immortal. This is something he doesn't want to see. He only wants to change the ending, and the details in these processes can be left unchanged. Otherwise, he doesn't know if irreversible things will happen in the future. After all, crossing into the world in the book already exists, and having another little butterfly is not impossible, so he did not interfere with the life trajectory of the little medical fairy. However, he knew that his arrival might cause some deviation from the original trajectory, but as long as the Millennium Plan of the Sole Heavenly Emperor remained unchanged and in progress, the future ending trajectory would still be as he knew or within a controllable range. So he wants to wait until later. If nothing unexpected happens, Xiao will become a doctor in Qingshan town in the future. It's also possible to take her away in a few years. His top priority now is to go to Haiyan City to register the identity badge of an alchemist, and then return to Ukraine to be honest. At this moment, the little girl looked at the food in her hand, then at the figure getting farther and farther away, as well as the smile imprinted in her mind. Her mouth curved upwards, revealing a smile. She couldn't help but feel that she had put the food in her mouth and started eating it. Looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, her heart warmed and she thought, I don't know if we can see that big brother again. After Han Tianyao left Qingshan town, he immediately summoned Ziyunyi to fly towards Haiyan City. After an hour of rushing, he arrived at Blackrock City. After paying the city tax and entering the city, he walked directly towards the Alchemists' Guild. After arriving and consuming a portion of the medicinal herbs in the assessment of the Alchemists' Guild, he successfully refined a first-grade pill called Condensing Fire Pill, using the second portion of the herbs, becoming a first-grade alchemist. When Frank and Otto learned that Han Tianyao had become a first-grade alchemist at the age of only 11, they were both shocked. They then looked around Han Tianyao, but in the end, Han Tianyao couldn't bear their gaze and demanded badges from them. Frank and Otto gave up on the first item of the alchemist's badge and robe when they were preparing for it, and then handed it over to Han Tianyao. After Han Tianyao took the badge and robe and put them into the ring, he didn't wait much. After bidding farewell to Frank and Otto, he left the Alchemists' Guild. Otto watched Han Tianyao leave and sighed, this son is really a genius in refining medicine. He has achieved such success at a young age. As long as he doesn't die prematurely, his future achievements will definitely surpass those of Fama and Guha. Frank also nodded upon hearing this. Han Tianyao left Haiyan City and flew towards Wutan City. While passing through Qingshan town, he inquired with an employee of Wanyao Studio about Xiao being taken in by Boss Xiao, but did not make any further stops and flew towards Wutancheng. After several hours of flying, Han Tianyao finally arrived in Wutancheng at noon. Looking at the city in front of him, he didn't hesitate too much. After entering the city, he walked directly towards his residence. It had been almost a year since he returned, and the residence had already accumulated some dust. Han Tianyao looked at this dust and didn't say much. He immediately cleaned up the house and started to rest. Chapter 6. Xiaojia's mother falls, Han Tianyao promotes to second rank. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next morning, Han Tianyao got up and washed up before leaving. He planned to go to the Meitel auction house to buy some medicinal herbs for refining. After having some breakfast on the way, he went to the Meitel auction house and bought 30 medicinal herbs for clotting pills, 30 medicinal herbs for reviving spring pills, 30 medicinal herbs for reviving qi pills, and 30 medicinal herbs for boosting energy pills. He spent 200,000 gold coins and walked towards his residence, buying some food along the way. After arriving home, Han Tianyao summoned the purple abyss cauldron and began preparing to refine medicine. After decades of refining, the finished pills had already been refined. There are 27 coagulation pills, 29 spring recovery pills, 30 chi recovery pills, and 28 energy storage pills, respectively. Han Tianyao looked at these pills and felt a sense of accomplishment in his heart. He then collected these pills and the purple abyss cauldron into the ring and walked out of the room towards the mountains and forests outside the city. After arriving at the cave where he had previously lived in the martial arts arena, he sat down to meditate and regulate his breathing. These days of alchemy showed signs of breakthrough in his cultivation, so he sat down to regulate his breathing, adjusted his state, and prepared for the next breakthrough. As his martial arts reached the heavenly level, there was definitely a lot of movement during operation. In order to not attract attention, he came here to practice. After the adjustment was completed, Han Tianyao immediately activated his martial arts and began to break through. With the operation of the cultivation method, the surrounding crazy fighting energy surged towards Han Tianyao and entered his body, flowing into the dantian along the tendons and meridians. As time passed, at a certain moment, bang! There was a muffled sound. Han Tianyao opened his eyes and felt the power inside his body. He looked inside at the sea urchin dojing in the dantian and said, "We have now broken through to the second star of the Big Dipper Master, and it is still in the middle stage of the second star. It is truly a heavenly level skill." After saying this, he stood up and returned to Wutan. The next day, Han Tianyao was walking on his way to the Mitel auction house, intending to sell the pills in his hand. However, when he passed by the Xiao family's door, he saw that the door was open, with mourning flags and white lanterns hanging on both sides of the door. The plaque was covered in white cloth, and the guards at the door were also wearing mourning clothes. Standing at the door, one could still hear cries coming from inside. After taking a glance, Han Tianyao continued to walk towards the Mitel auction house, knowing in his heart that Gu Wenxin, the mother of the Xiao family, had passed away. However, his main task now was to sell the pill in his hand, rather than lamenting here. At the auction house, Han Tianyao took out his first-level alchemist badge and took out 20 pills each, including the blood coagulation pill, spring revitalization pill, chi revitalization pill, and power accumulation pill. After inspecting them one by one, he sold them all and earned nearly 200 million gold coins, as well as the most noble bin card in the auction house, the purple gold card. Han Tianyao took the purple gold card and checked the amount inside. After confirming everything was correct, he spent 3,000 gold coins to buy 10 medicinal herbs of the second-grade pill, Ice Heart pill, and packed them in a jade box. Then he put them and the badge into the ring and said goodbye to Guanai. Guanai just regained consciousness from shock and saw Han Tianyao's departure. He slowly said, "A young man of this age is already a master of great battles and a master of first-grade alchemy. I don't know what kind of expert it is to teach such disciples. The future achievements are limitless." Han Tianyao was on his way back, but when he passed by the Xiao family again, the cries in the mansion were much quieter. Han Tianyao didn't stop much, but walked towards home. After 2 months of exploration, he took out his notes and the second-grade pill, Ice Heart pill, for learning and research. After spending 3 medicinal herbs, he finally refined an Ice Heart pill. Looking at the blue pill in his hand, Han Tianyao smiled and said, "These 2 months of hard work and specialization have not been in vain. The second-grade pill has also been refined. I am now a quasi-second-grade alchemist." Without hesitation, Han Tianyao immediately took the pill. After taking it, it immediately melted and a cold sensation rushed to his forehead, followed by an incomparable coolness. Han Tianyao felt that his fatigue had just dissipated and his soul was incredibly clear. He then continued to work hard, intending to continue refining the pill. Previously, the first pill could only be considered lucky or stepping into the threshold of second-grade pills. Only by refining the second pill can he truly step into the ranks of second-grade alchemists. After 2 days of refining, after consuming a portion of medicinal herbs, Han Tianyao refined 2 ice heart pills. He put them into a pill bottle and collected them with the purple yuan ding to receive the ring. He then began to rest and wait for the next day, as Han Tianyao was planning to use a different fire to refine ice heart pills. The next morning, Han Tianyao opened his eyes, got up to wash himself, and then walked towards the Maitel auction hall. When he arrived at the auction house, he looked at the bustling exhibition hall and the magnificent hall. Han Tianyao had no worries in his heart, as he had already been amazed when he first came. His gaze scanned the wide hall and found a hall with the Jianbao Pavilion sign hanging. After explaining his purpose to the Jianbao Pavilion staff, they immediately called for the steward to take Han Tianyao to this reception room. After that, they called for Xun'er to come. After Xun'er arrived, Han Tianyao told him his purpose and wanted to borrow his specialized alchemy room to use. Upon hearing this, Xun'er had some speculations in his heart and asked, "Have you already surpassed the second-level alchemist, Han?" Upon hearing Xun'er's question, Han Tianyao smiled and said, "Not yet, but with your good words, I came to your alchemy room this time to use it to break through the second-level alchemist. I wonder if Master Gu can do it conveniently. If there is any job that I can ask for, I will not refuse as long as I can do it." Upon seeing Han Tianyao say this, Xun'er smiled and said, "Han, you're welcome. Isn't it just a matter of borrowing Gu's refining room? What's there? Han, you just need to tell Gu about it. If you have any other requirements, but if you need them, please follow Gu." After saying this, Xun'er stood up and walked out, and Han Tianyao quickly followed suit. After walking for a while, Xun'er led Han Tianyao to a stop in front of a secret room. Xun'er said to Han Tianyao, "This is where Gu usually meditates and refines pills." With a big wave of his hand, De Meng slowly opened the secret room, and Han Tianyao followed Xun'er into it. The first thing that caught Han Tianyao's eye was the medicine cauldron in the middle. Han Tianyao looked at it and saw that it was a 2-mouthed cauldron. There were some scrolls placed on the bookshelves near the wall on both sides. There was a stone platform in front of Han Tianyao, and a cattail was placed in the middle of the platform. Xun'er then said, "What do you think of this place, little friend?" Han Tianyao nodded and smiled, "Not bad, thank you very much, Master Gu." "You're welcome." Surprisingly, the little friend is satisfied, so Gu will not disturb you. "If there is a need, just let me know," Gu said. When Xun'er left, he casually closed the door. Han Tianyao immediately walked to the stone platform and sat on the futon, taking out all the necessary things. Then, he closed his eyes and took a brief breath to relax. He used his right hand and his mind moved. Yin and yang inflammation appeared in his palm, and 2 flames, one white and one black, slowly rotated in his palm. Han Tianyao looked at the flame in his hand and then threw it into the cauldron. At the moment when Yin and Yang Xuanyan entered the cauldron, the patterns on the surface of the cauldron slowly lit up, and the sun and moon patterns on both sides of the purple abyss cauldron also emitted black and white light. Han Tianyao was briefly surprised to see this, and then used his soul power to explore and found that the strange fire was not boiling and burning like that in the cauldron. Instead, it seemed to be injected with a wooden attribute of fighting energy, quiet in the cauldron and slowly rotating in it. However, he didn't think much. It must be because of the sun and moon patterns on the surface of the purple abyss cauldron. Sun and moon, as well as yin and yang, are the same power attributes. Han Tianyao began to control the unusual fire, and after a difficult time, he threw the frost flower lin from the jade box into the cauldron for extraction. After a period of extraction, Han Tianyao successfully extracted the frost flower lin, took it out, and placed it in the jade box. Next, he threw the ice heart grass into the cauldron and processed it in the same way. Then, he threw the second-order water attribute beast core into the cauldron for extraction. With his careful control of the unusual fire, the beast core was like 1,000-year-old cold. Like ice, it slowly melted under the envelopment of a strange fire until it finally turned into a liquid. At this point, Han Tianyao threw the previously refined frost blossom and ice heart grass into the cauldron, injected some wood attribute fighting energy into it when merging, and then used soul power to control them for fusion. After a while, under the control of Han Tianyao, it had successfully fused and now gradually formed a young pill. The next step is to bake it with fire to make the surface bumpy and smooth, making the pill look more rounded as a whole. After a period of baking, the surface of the pill had become round and smooth. Han Tianyao took it out and placed it in his palm. At this moment, he found that a circle of pill lines appeared on the surface of the pill. This discovery surprised Han Tianyao a bit. He didn't expect that the first time he used a special fire to refine pills did not fail, and even the pills he refined still had pill lines. He lifted his head and looked at the purple abyss cauldron in front of him. The appearance of pill lines was closely related to the purple abyss cauldron in front of him. Han Tianyao muttered, "This purple abyss cauldron has given me another surprise." Immediately, he put away the ice heart pill and took out the remaining 2 medicinal herbs. He planned to refine the remaining herbs into ice heart pill as well. After waiting for a period of time, Han Tianyao spent a portion of medicinal herbs at Shuyuan www.xiaoshuyuan.com and successfully refined an ice heart pill. However, this time it was refined using Duki Huahua. He put the ice heart pill into a jade bottle and put it into the receiving ring with the purple yuan ding. Then he walked outside. When the door opened, Han Tianyao saw Guanai waiting outside and saw him come out. Guanai walked up and asked, "How did you make it, little friend?" "It has been successfully refined." Han Tianyao smiled and took out an ice heart pill, presenting it to Guanai. After seeing the ice heart pill in his hand, Guanai was also surprised in his heart. He looked at Han Tianyao and smiled respectfully, "Congratulations, little friend. With such achievements at such a young age, the future is bound to be limitless." "Ha ha ha. Thank you, Master Gu, for lending me the Chamber of Secrets. Otherwise, I don't know when I can reach the 2nd level, Han Tianyao said humbly. "Hey, you're so humble. Even without my secret room, it's a certainty for you to become a 2nd-level alchemist, huh?" Guanai laughed. Upon hearing this, Han Tianyao just smiled and didn't say much. Then he asked Guanai, "Master Gu, how long has it been since I entered?" Upon hearing this, Guanai replied, "A day has passed." Upon hearing this, Han Tianyao nodded and realized that he already had 4 ice heart pills, plus he had not sold any of them. There were a total of 30.8 pills. He bowed and bid farewell to Guanai, heading towards his own residence. As he was about to pass by Xiao's doorstep, Han Tianyao noticed several children around the ages of 4, 5, or 6 walking towards him, followed by an adult who appeared to be servants. These children are almost boys surrounding one of the girls. The girl is pink and jade carved, and her small face looks very cute. It can be seen that this girl will definitely be a stunning beauty in the future. Chapter 7. Encountering Xiaoyan on the road and suppressing fire at night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Han Tianyao stopped his steps and looked at the group of children. When he saw a little girl, the fire-swallowing beads inside his body jumped a few times. Han Tianyao raised his eyebrows, and it must be the flames that interested the fire-swallowing beads. The only thing that caused such a fierce reaction was the flame. A 4-year-old girl from the left and right had a flame in her body, and looking at her attire, she knew she was a wealthy child. He already knew who this little girl was. The little princess of the ancient tribe, Xun'er, should be called Xun'er now. He also saw Xiaoyan in this group of children, saw the ring on his hand, and Han Tianyao knew it was a bone. Ling Ring, the medicine elder is sleeping in the ring, but he can also wake up at any time. Han Tianyao watched as they walked towards him, and as they were about to pass by, he intentionally or unintentionally released his own soul power and strange fire breath. These breaths were relatively weak, but for those with strange fire secrets or strong soul power, they could still be detected. As Xiaoyan and Xun'er passed by him, a faint light flashed in Xiaoyan's ring, and Xun'er, attracted by the strange fire breath, unconsciously walked towards Han Tianyao. Han Tianyao noticed Xun'er's approach, stopped, and turned to look at Xun'er in front of him. After seeing the big brother in front of her stop, Xun'er also regained consciousness and stood in front of Han Tianyao, looking up at him with big eyes blinking, looking cute and adorable. Han Tianyao looked at her, and to be honest, he was adorable by the silly and cute Xun'er. He bent down, leaned his face closer, smiled, and said, "Little sister, what's up with you?" Upon hearing this, Xun'er immediately regained her senses and saw the smiling older brother in front of her. She shook her head and smiled, saying, "I'm fine." At this moment, Xiaoyan and the others also followed and came to Xun'er and Han Tianyao, asking, "Sister Xun'er, what's wrong?" Upon hearing this, Xun'er said to Xiaoyan and the others, "I'm fine." Then she looked at Han Tianyao and said, "By the way, big brother, my name is Xun'er. What's your name?" "My name is Han Tianyao." Han Tianyao smiled and asked, then looked at Xiaoyan and the others and deliberately asked, "Are you the Xiao family?" Upon hearing this, Xiaoyan and his companions said, "Yes." Then Xiaoyan said, "My name is Xiaoyan." After Xiaoyan finished speaking, the remaining few children all introduced themselves. Han Tianyao looked at them and introduced them one by one. He smiled and then looked at Xiaoyan and said, "So where are you going?" "We plan to take Xun'er's sister around." Xiaoyan pointed at Xun'er and said. "Oh, then you guys keep wandering, I'll leave first." "Goodbye," Han Tianyao said before leaving. Xun'er looked at Han Tianyao's gradually disappearing figure and said to Xiaoyan and the others, "I don't want to wander anymore, I want to go back." "Let's go back then." Xiaoyan and the others heard that Xun'er was going back, so they followed suit. Upon returning to the solitary courtyard of the Xiao family, Ling Ying appeared in front of Xun'er and said, "Miss, you were too adventurous just now." "Well, I see. By the way, Ling Ying, you go investigate him and see who he really is," said Xun'er. "Yes, miss," Ling Ying said and disappeared. Xun'er sat on the bed, staring out the window in a daze. After a while, she finally regained her composure and said, "I didn't expect that in this city of Wutan, there is a talented person who is no less talented than those of the Imperial clan. At this age, he has reached the level of the Great Do Master and also possesses a strange fire. I don't know which kind of strange fire it is, but judging from the aura it emits, it is full of the breath of life. Is it the inflammation of life?" After Han Tianyao returned to his residence, he began preparing his next cultivation plan and thought to himself, "The current level of Duki has reached the mid-stage of the Big Do Master's 2 stars, and it won't be long before it reaches the later stage. So, in a few days, he will go to the Warcraft mountain range again to improve his cultivation. However, now he can first reflect on the soul method he obtained from cultivation in the cave. He has been practicing fighting skills, improving his cultivation, and elevating his alchemy to the 2nd level. He has always forgotten that he still has a volume of soul cultivation method, and my soul power is almost enough to enter the early stage of the mortal level. I hope this soul method can help me advance." At this point, he began cross-legged meditation and began practicing the soul cultivation method obtained from the cave. The next day, when Han Tianyao opened his eyes, a wave of soul surged out of his body. Han Tianyao could clearly feel everything outside for 100 meters, feeling the beauty of soul power. The corner of his mouth also slightly raised, and his current soul realm had been elevated to the early stage of the mortal mirror. After experiencing his soul power, Han Tianyao discovered a powerful aura that was very hidden and he didn't pay much attention at first. If it weren't for the owner of this aura suddenly exposing his own breath, Han Tianyao might not have noticed it. Who is the owner of this aura? And judging from this person's aura, their cultivation level should be at the level of Dowang. Han Tianyao muttered to himself, and then he realized that this aura had disappeared. Did you know that I found him, so I left? Han Tianyao said, then added, the only Dowang powerhouse who can appear in Wutan city is probably Ling Ying, the guard of Xun'er. Perhaps Xun'er asked Ling Ying to investigate me. Han Tianyao knew that he had already caught Xun'er's attention and would definitely investigate himself, but this was also expected by Han Tianyao. However, as long as she was not a member of other imperial clans, especially the Soul clan, Xun'er would not take the time to spend on herself. Her primary task was to focus on the ancient jade of the Xiao family, not herself. In the evening, in the solitary courtyard of the Xiao family, Xun'er heard Ling Ying's report. Her small face showed surprise, her eyes wide open, and she looked like a cute treasure. She said, Fanjing's soul power, do you mean his soul power has broken through to Fanjing? Yes, miss, that young man had just stepped into the mortal mirror, in the early stage of the mortal mirror. At that time, my subordinates were also startled by the fluctuation of the young man's soul, and I couldn't control my own breath well. It should have been noticed by that young man. Ling Ying said. I didn't expect that Wu Tanqing had such a talented and extraordinary talent. An 11-year-old boy with a strange flame, his cultivation level reached that of a master of great martial arts, and he had the level of a second-grade alchemist. With his newly advanced soul power in the mortal mirror, if I hadn't known his background, I would have thought he was a member of the imperial family like me. Xun'er said in surprise. At this moment, Ling Ying said, Miss, how should we handle this person? After thinking for a moment, Xun'er looked at Ling Ying and said, Do Ling Lao have any suggestions? Miss, I don't think it's necessary to deal with this person. Our primary task now is to complete the task assigned to us by the clan leader and obtain the Buddha Ancient Emperor Jade from the Xiao family. Surprisingly, this young man is not someone sent by another imperial clan, so we don't need to waste time on him. Moreover, since this young man has achieved such success, his master is likely from Zhongzhou. Therefore, as long as the young man doesn't provoke us, we won't provoke him either. As long as the young lady receives the Buddha Ancient Emperor Jade as soon as possible, she can leave this remote place and return to the clan. Ling Ying said. Well, you're right. The Xiao family's ancient jade is the most important thing. Everything else is not important, so there's no need to waste time. However, the young man still needs to pay attention to it and see if he can be included in our ancient tribe and become a member of it. After all, it's really a pity that such a talented young man can't accept our ancient tribe. Xun'er said, holding her small head in her hand. Ling Ying nodded and said, Yes, Mississippi. After speaking, it disappeared as if it had never been before. Xun'er was the only one left in the room. She sat down in front of the bed and stared out the window in a daze. After some time, Xun'er felt a burning pain in her body. She endured the pain and collapsed on the bed, shrinking her body into a ball. Her lovely little face was now wrinkled into a ball, and soon beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. This was the meridian of Xun'er being burned by the scorching fire of the Golden Emperor. At this moment, Han Tianyao arrived over the Xiao family. He first used his soul power to conceal his own breath, and then used it to explore Xun'er's residence. When he found Xun'er's residence, he also detected a figure moving towards Xun'er's residence, but that figure was a bit sneaky. Han Tianyao knew that the figure didn't need to be detected and knew it was Xiaoyan, because only Xiaoyan in the entire Xiao family would do this and think of doing it. So Han Tianyao quietly approached him, took out a package of medicinal powder from the ring, and sprinkled it over Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan felt something falling from east to west, and just as he was about to look up, he suddenly felt dizzy. Then he pounced forward, and as he was about to touch the ground, one hand caught him, and slowly put him down. After taking another look at Xiaoyan and confirming that he was unconscious, he immediately withdrew towards Xun'er's residence. When she arrived at Xun'er's residence, she discovered that a window was open, so she entered through that window. When she entered the room, she saw a person lying on the bed in front of her, but she had already shrunk into a ball. Han Tianyao walked forward gently, looked at Xiaojia, who was huddled in front of him. He used his soul to explore the child fire in her body. Without hesitation, he immediately put his hand on her forehead. Then he mobilized the energy of fire-eating beads to inject into Xiaoxia's body at this time. He entered the elixir field along the meridians to suppress the child fire in her body. Later, Han Tianyao injected the energy of life emitted by the inflammation into his body, flowing all over his body along the tendons and meridians, and began to repair the meridians burned by the quilt fire. After the repair, he went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and took his hand away. At this moment, Xun'er opened her eyes and looked at the person in front of her. She had previously noticed an external energy injecting into her body, and with the help of this energy, the burning fire of the Golden Emperor in her body was suppressed by this energy, unable to resist. Then, another energy entered her body and flowed through her body along the meridians, repairing her own meridians. At this moment, Xun'er blinked her eyes and looked at the young man in front of her who was helping her, while Han Tianyao was also looking at her, and neither side spoke for a moment. Not long after, Xun'er spoke up and asked, "Big brother, are you here to find me?" "Yes, the first time I saw you on the street today, I knew your identity was not simple. I was very curious about your identity, and I noticed that there was a strange fire in your body, which is why I came here. However, I just wanted to see what other strange fires looked like. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you. But after seeing your painful appearance, I knew you must have been tormented by the strange fire, so I took action to help suppress the strange fire in your body, and I also knew what the flames inside your body were," Han Tianyao said. Upon hearing this, Xun'er looked at Han Tianyao and said, "Surprisingly, you already know about the strange fire in my body, but I still need your help to keep it a secret. As for my identity, I cannot tell you at the moment, but what I can tell you is that I am not from Wutan City, nor from the Empire of Empires, nor from this northwest continent." After listening to her finish, Han Tianyao pretended to think for a moment and then exclaimed in surprise, "Are you from Zhongzhou?" Xun'er looked at the surprise on his face and smiled, saying, I guess so, but you also know Zhongzhou." "Well, I saw some records about Zhongzhou in a strong person's notes." Chapter 8. Upgrade to Level 3, Treading Do Spirit. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing this, Xun'er smiled and said, "So brother Tianyao also has a strong master." "Well, almost everything I have now was given by that strong person." Han Tianyao was not wrong either. If it weren't for that, he wouldn't have become a second-level alchemist yet, nor could he have obtained his first extraordinary fire so quickly, and his strength wouldn't have improved so quickly. Han Tianyao looked at Xun'er in front of him and smiled, "All right, I should go now. You should rest well, and you don't have to worry about Zihua causing you any pain again in the future. You can sleep and practice with peace of mind until one day you have the ability to refine it, and your strength will take a step higher." "I will practice well," Xun'er nodded and said. Han Tianyao smiled and patted her shoulder with his hand, then stood up and spread his wings, flying towards the window. Xun'er was also stunned when she saw Han Tianyao wielding the eagle wings. After regaining her senses, she was the only one left in the room. She slowly walked to the window and looked at the night scene outside, her mouth slightly raised, saying, "I didn't expect to see rare flying skills here." After flying out of the attic, Han Tianyao first went to the place where Xiaoyan was sleeping. He saw that Xiaoyan was still asleep there, pulled him up, found a house with someone in front of him, placed him on the steps, and then went up to knock on the door. As Han Tianyao did not know Xiaoyan's room, he did so. Dong dong dong, Han Tianyao immediately flew towards his residence when he noticed the people inside opening the door. After returning to his residence, Han Tianyao began to meditate and practice the method of soul. The next morning, Han Tianyao opened his eyes, and after a night of practice, he did not feel any fatigue. Instead, he was full of energy and felt that his soul power had improved. He immediately got up and went out, tidied up and walked towards the Mytel auction house. After arriving at the Mytel auction house, he explained his purpose and took out his purple gold card. He was taken to the VIP room by the receptionist and then sent someone to invite Master Guanai. After Han Tianyao saw Guanai, he left behind 1 ice heart pill and 2 spring revival pills, and sold all the remaining pills. He had originally wanted to see if there were any medicinal materials for bone growth pills, but was told that there was not a complete set of bone growth pills and only 1 imitation fruit. Han Tianyao bought them and planned to go to the Medicine Refiners Guild in Black Rock City to see if they could be purchased. After discussing with Guanai, he said goodbye. On the way back, Han Tianyao met Xiaojia, the head of the Xiao family. When Xiaojia's servant saw Han Tianyao, he immediately whispered a few words to him. Suddenly, Xiaojia looked at Han Tianyao with a shocked expression on his face. He didn't expect this person to reach the level of a second-grade alchemist at such an age. At the same time, he secretly thought to himself, "You must not offend me, you must make friends." Then he walked up to Han Tianyao with a smile on his face, arched his hand, and respectfully said, "Master Han, I have seen Master Han in Xiaojia's house." "Oh. So it's Master Xiao. I wonder why Master Xiao is looking for me. I would like to invite Master Han to my Xiao family, may I ask if Master Han would appreciate it?" Xiaojia arched his hand. Previously, the servant reported that there was an alchemist in Wutan City, and even Guanai from the Mytel auction hall had a good relationship with him. Moreover, he may have reached the level of a second-grade alchemist, which shocked Xiaojia a bit. This morning, the servant reported that the alchemist was already at the Mytel auction hall. Therefore, Xiaojia thought that before the other 2 families reacted, this alchemist should invite the Xiao family to try to win over him. Even if not, try to get along with him as much as possible. With this thought in mind, Xiaojia immediately stood up and went to the Mytel auction house, which led to the scene before him. Upon hearing this, Han Tianyao smiled and said, "Thank you very much for your kindness, Master Xiao. However, I still have something important to attend to. How about we meet again when I have time?" Upon hearing this, Xiaojia seemed to have anticipated it earlier. He arched his hand again and smiled, saying, "Surprisingly, Master Han has something to do. So Xiao won't bother Master Han anymore. If Master Han needs our Xiao families, they can do it without hesitation." "Master Xiao, you're welcome, so I'll say goodbye first," Han Tianyao said. "Master Han, take your time," Xiaojia also said. Han Tianyao did not return to his residence, but walked towards the outside of the city, and then spread out the eagle wings and flew towards the Warcraft mountain range. After flying for a few hours, Han Tianyao arrived at Haiyan City. After presenting his alchemist badge to the Alchemist Union, he explained his purpose to the receptionist. The receptionist invited Han Tianyao to a room and invited the steward to explain Han Tianyao's purpose. The steward immediately sent someone to collect the medicinal herbs. After communicating with Han Tianyao, the medicinal herbs were collected by someone, totaling 10. After Han Tianyao paid the money, he collected the 10 medicinal herbs of the bone revitalizing pill and put them in the ring. At this time, the steward said, "Han Xiaoyu, aren't you here to take the second-grade alchemist exam?" "No, wait a little longer. I'll take the exam again in a few days," Han Tianyao smiled. "Okay." After leaving Black Rock City, Han Tianyao flew towards the cave of the Warcraft mountain range, where he wanted to refine the bone refining pill. After a period of flight, Han Tianyao arrived at the cave where he had previously obtained purple cloud wings and alchemy cultivation. Han Tianyao arrived at the entrance of the cave, and after pressing the mechanism, the stone gate slowly opened. Han Tianyao walked in and looked around, only to find that there was nothing like when he left. Moving to the center position, take out the cattail from the ring and place it on the ground to start meditating and practicing. After sitting down, Han Tianyao took a deep breath and began to practice his martial arts. 3 days later, inside the cave, Han Tianyao opened his eyes and felt the power inside his body. He smiled and said, "I have now broken through to 3 stars of the Great Do Master. Now I will start refining medicine. Take out the medicinal herbs of Ziyuan Ding and 10 parts of Xingu Dan." After Han Tianyao calms down, he reaches out and triggers a strange fire, throwing it into the ding. When it's about time, Han Tianyao throws the imitation fruit into the ding and refines it. After 6 or 7 days of refining, Han Tianyao refined 8 bone growth pills, packed them together with the purple abyss cauldron and put them into the ring. Han Tianyao exerted his body and slowly stood up, saying, "All the bone growth pills have been refined, and then he will start practicing again." The next morning, Han Tianyao took out 2 scrolls from his ring. The first scroll was a high-level combat skill called Flame Wrath Palm at the Xian level, and the second scroll was a low-level combat skill called Tiger Roar, Angry Sky Roar at the Earth level, which was a sound wave combat skill. Han Tianyao looked at these 2 volumes of fighting skills and put away Tiger Roar and Furious Heavenly Roar first. After practicing the Flame Wrath Palm, he would then ponder this sound wave fighting skill. Han Tianyao opened his Flame Wrath Palm and checked the operation route. After reading it, Han Tianyao began to practice according to the operation route, and then thought about what was wrong. 2 years later, on a mountain peak, Han Tianyao was standing there with his eyes closed. At one moment, he opened his eyes and stared ahead. Soon after, the young man took a deep breath and began to manipulate his fighting spirit, following a specific route before converging to his throat. Finally, he let out a fierce roar from his mouth. Roar. As the roar spread, circles of sound waves emanated from the boy's mouth, slowly expanding towards the distance, mixed with strong shock waves. Wherever they passed, trees fell and rocks rolled, creating a mess. Han Tianyao looked at everything in front of him and was very satisfied with his masterpiece. He smiled and said, "The Tiger Roar and Angry Sky Roar have been trained, the Flame Wrath Palm has been fully mastered, and his cultivation has just reached the peak of the 9 stars of the Great Do Master. It won't be long before he can break through the Doling spirit." Immediately summoning Ziyunyi, he flew towards the cave. Upon arriving at the cave, Han Tianyao sat cross-legged and took out a scroll of the 3rd-grade pills prescription, Jiuhuadan, from his ring. Over the past 2 years, Han Tianyao had been practicing martial arts while fighting against Warcraft in the Warcraft mountain range. He also obtained some medicinal herbs and Warcraft beast core, among which he also gathered a 3rd-grade pills medicinal herbs for Jiuhuadan. So Han Tianyao plans to give it a try and see if he can use this medicinal herb to refine the 3rd-grade pill, Jiuhuadan. If it can be successfully refined, he will be considered a 3rd-grade alchemist. So Han Tianyao kept turning over his notes and prescriptions for the next 3 days to ensure that this was the chance of success in alchemy. On the evening of the 4th day, Han Tianyao began to meditate and regulate his breath, preparing to start alchemy in the morning. The next morning, Han Tianyao opened his eyes with a gleam of white light. He lifted his hand and took out the purple abyss cauldron and medicinal herbs from the ring, then used his hand to summon yin-yang double inflammation and threw them into the purple abyss cauldron. Looking at the black and white flames in the cauldron, Han Tianyao's attention began to be highly focused. After taking a deep breath, he began to extract the medicinal herbs. After a period of refining, nothing unexpected happened. The refining process has been successfully completed, and the next step is to merge the pills. Han Tianyao adjusted his breath slightly before starting to merge the pills. He first sent the refined flame grass into the cauldron, and then sent the refined magic core and other items into it. After injecting the wood attribute Duki, he merged them. After waiting for a considerable amount of time, the melting pill step was finally completed, and the rest would be easier. Under the slow roasting of the flames, the rough and bumpy surface of the young pill turned into a smooth and even finished pill. After almost baking, Han Tianyao used his soul power to take out the pill and looked at the fiery red pill the size of a longan in his hand. Han Tianyao smiled and said, "I didn't expect it to succeed." Now, Han Tianyao is also considered a third-grade alchemist. Go to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Then he put the pill into a jade bottle and collected it with the purple abyss cauldron. Seeing that the sky outside was already dark, he immediately began practicing his martial arts. The next day, after a night of cultivation, Han Tianyao felt that he was a little closer to the breakthrough spirit, so he decided to continue his cultivation, thinking of not breaking through the spirit and not leaving the level. Bang! After nearly a month of cultivation, accompanied by a muffled sound emanating from Han Tianyao's body, an aura unique to Douling emanated from his body. Han Tianyao opened his eyes and a black and white light flashed through them, saying, "Finally, we have broken through to Douling." After feeling the power of his own breakthrough, Han Tianyao closed his eyes and stabilized his state. On the second day, Han Tianyao used his fighting spirit to try to condense a weapon. He imagined the shape and appearance of a weapon in his mind, and then gradually condensed a fiery red long sword in his hand with his fighting spirit. The blade was straight, 4 feet long and 3 fingers wide, with a handle half a foot long and the blade head made of Tang Hengdao's blade. Han Tianyao looked at the knife condensed in his hand and nodded in satisfaction. Then he swung it out, and a crescent-shaped blade burst out from the blade, cutting against the stone wall of the cave. Suddenly, a 1-meter-long and half-finger-deep knife mark appeared on the wall. Seeing this, Han Tianyao smiled and then his mind moved. The knife in his hand disappeared, and his fingers touched his chin, murmuring, "I have now reached the level of Douling and the third level of the alchemist. Next, I can go to the holy city for a visit, but before that, I will go back to Wutan city and see the Xiao family." After speaking, Han Tianyao immediately set off. Before leaving, he cleaned up the cave, then walked out of the cave, closed the stone gate, and summoned Xun'er to fly towards the direction of Wutan city. Chapter 9. Xun'er's doubt and conversation with Han Tianyao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After flying for almost a day, Han Tianyao arrived at his residence in Wutan in the evening and found that it seemed like someone had been there before. It didn't look like it had been uninhabited for 2 years, with no dust at all. Last time, he hadn't returned for almost a year, and his residence was covered in dust. This time, he didn't come back for more than 2 years, but instead, it seemed like someone had lived there. Han Tianyao frowned and released his soul power. After exploring for a while, he didn't find anything. He thought to himself, "Who has come to my house, Xun'er? Or is it the head of the Xiao family, or is it Xun'er?" However, Han Tianyao didn't continue to think about it. Now he just wants to rest well, and the rest will be discussed tomorrow. In the solitary courtyard of the Xiao family, there was a little girl who appeared to be around 6 or 7 years old. Her face was fair and delicate, and she had delicate facial features at a young age, indicating that the future would be stunning. At this moment, the little girl was sitting on a stool, her elbows against the table, her palms supporting her chin, and her eyes staring out the window in a daze. At this moment, a black shadow appeared, and a person appeared from the shadow and said to the girl, "Miss, Han Tianyao has returned to Wutan." "Oh. Brother Tianyao has returned. He has been away for almost 2 years now, right? Have you seen what cultivation Lingying is now?" Xun'er heard Lingying's words and immediately regained her senses, asking. Just stepped into Douling. Lingying said, and when he sensed Han Tianyao's aura, he was also shocked. If Han Tianyao were a genius in the Imperial clan, with a divine bloodline like a young lady, and rich cultivation resources, it would be reasonable for him to reach Douling at the age of 13. But Han Tianyao, he only achieved this step by relying on his own opportunities and talents. This son is really impressive. Upon hearing this, Xun'er said, "Oh, it's Do." What are you talking about? Do Ling. Xun'er stared at Ling Ying with big eyes and turned her head, looking incredulous, as if she was trying to verify the truth from Ling Ying. I have changed Xun'er's personality here. Well, yes, Han Tianyao's cultivation has now reached the level of Doling. Ling Ying nodded confidently. Xun'er listened to Ling Ying's affirmative words, blinking her eyes and slightly opening her mouth. Not long after, Xun'er regained her senses and then lowered her head to think, can he be the illegitimate son of a prominent figure from another imperial clan? If so, which prominent figure is he? Will he also come to retrieve the Xiao family's ancient jade like my ancient clan? Mississippi. Ah. Xun'er heard Ling Ying's voice and came to her senses. Miss, what should we do next? Ling Ying asked. Xun'er thought for a moment and said, don't worry about Han Tianyao's matter. As long as he doesn't come to rob us of the ancient jade of the Xiao family, we don't need to provoke him. Yes, miss. By the way, did Guyu have any clues? Xun'er asked. Ling Ying shook her head and said, so far, we haven't found any clues. Xiaojian's subordinates have also investigated and haven't found any trace of Guyu. If it's not with Xiaojian, where would it be? Xun'er began to ponder. The next day, Han Tianyao met Xun'er on his way to the Maitel auction house. Xun'er was still surrounded by several young people like last time, including Xiaoyan. At this time, Xiaoyan looked like he was 7 or 8 years old, and his cultivation was in the 5th stage of Doji Qi. When Xun'er saw Han Tianyao, she smiled and walked up to him, saying with a smile, Brother Tianyao, it's been a long time no see. Well, long time no see, Han Tianyao smiled. After speaking, he asked again, where are you going? We went to the Xiao family market for a stroll. Upon hearing this, Han Tianyao also nodded and smiled as he looked at Xiaoyan, saying, Brother Xiaoyan, I didn't expect to see that you have reached the 5th level of Do Qi in more than 2 years. It is very likely that you will reach Do Master around the age of 11 or 12. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyan also smiled and said, then borrow Brother Han's auspicious words. His tone was somewhat proud. Han Tianyao recognized this tone and smiled without paying attention. This was also normal. After all, talented people are somewhat arrogant, and Xiaoyan was no exception. He thought to himself, in 4 more years, you will have a low period. After 3 years, you will have to face a retirement period, so you won't be able to laugh. Xun'er asked at this moment, where is Brother Tianyao going? I plan to go to the Maitel auction house and see if there are any things and herbs I need. Oh, can I go with you? Xun'er asked. Han Tianyao was somewhat surprised. He didn't expect Xun'er to go to the Maitel auction with him, so he asked, what are you doing with me? I just want to go and see what the auction house manager looks like, okay. Xun'er blinked her big eyes and said. Han Tianyao looked at Xun'er like this and didn't know what to say for a moment. So he looked at the servant following Xiaoyan and said, could you please go back and tell your family head that Xun'er is going to the Maitel auction house with me, Han Tianyao. After it's over, I will send Xun'er back to the mansion. I'm going too. One of the young men stepped forward and said before the servant could speak. Han Tianyao looked at the young man in front of him and asked, who are you? My name is Xiao Ning, the young man replied. Upon hearing his name Xiao Ning, Han Tianyao thought to himself, it turned out to be a licking dog of Xun'er. Han Tianyao looked at him and said, why are you going with me too? Because I am not confident in handing over Xun'er to you, I want to protect Xun'er, Xiao Ning said. Upon hearing him say this, Xun'er frowned and looked at him, saying, I don't need you to protect me. Then she looked at Han Tianyao and smiled, besides, I believe Tianyao is not a bad person, right? Han Tianyao was about to praise Xiao Ning for being such a licking dog, but he didn't expect Xun'er to come like this. So he said, if Xun'er wants to go, then go ahead. Who else do you have? They don't want to go, Xun'er said first, then looked at Xiaoyan and said, Brother Xiaoyan, please take them back with your servant. Xiaoyan hesitated for a moment and said, why don't we go together? I also want to see what that Meitel auction house looks like. Next time, can we take Brother Xiaoyan with us? Xun'er looked at Xiaoyan and said with a confident expression. Well. Okay, Xiaoyan said, then looked at Han Tianyao and said, Brother Tianyao, Xun'er's sister, please do it. Han Tianyao felt helpless and said, okay, Brother Xiaoyan, rest assured. When you come back, I will safely bring Xun'er back to the Xiao family. Let's go back first, Xiaoyan said and led Xiao Ning and his servants towards the Xiao family. On the way, Han Tianyao and Xun'er walked towards the Meitel auction house. On the way, Han Tianyao looked at Xun'er and asked, Miss Xun'er, do you have anything to say to me? Just now, he was trying hard to separate the Xiao family. If there was nothing to say, ghosts wouldn't believe it. Upon hearing this, Xun'er looked at him and asked, is Brother Tianyao planning to talk on this street? Han Tianyao thought for a moment and said, come with me. Then he brought Xun'er to the auction house and presented the purple gold card to the receptionist. After making a request, the receptionist took Han Tianyao and Xun'er to a reception room and closed the door before leaving. I don't know what Xun'er wants to tell me. I want to know who you really are. Xun'er asked. When Han Tianyao heard Xun'er's question, he thought to himself, it seems that she is doubting whether she is from the ancient imperial family like her. After all, at the age of 13, she has reached a level that many people here are unlikely to reach in their lifetime. Even Xiaoyan is far behind me. It's strange if she doesn't doubt it. Besides, her suspicion is nothing more than thinking that I, like her, are all targeting the ancient jade of the Xiao family. Thinking of this, Han Tianyao looked at Xun'er and asked in reverse, so who are you? As young as you, someone injected a trace of fire into your body, and you are also the 4th-ranked Gene Emperor burning heaven flame on the strange fire list. But as far as I know, Gene Emperor burning heaven flame seems to be in the ancient tribe, right? How do you know about the ancient tribe? Do you really? Xun'er asked, glaring at Han Tianyao. No, I'm not a member of the Imperial clan. As for why I knew about the Imperial clan, of course, I got a chance left by an alchemist, which included his notes. In addition to his experience in refining medicine, there were also some observations, including the 8 ancient Imperial clans, said Han Tianyao. Upon hearing this, Xun'er lowered her head and pondered for a moment, then looked up at Han Tianyao and said, how much do you know about the ancient Imperial clan, or how much did the alchemist record about the ancient Imperial clan in his notes? Han Tianyao looked at her and understood her concerns. He said, I know there were 8 great Imperial clans in ancient times, and there were more than 1 or 2 Do emperors born in ancient times. The Imperial clans lived in the small world they opened up, and each Imperial clan was incredibly powerful, except for one now. Oh, by the way, I also know that each Imperial clan has a secret to protect together. You came to the Xiao family for this secret, right? After listening to his words, Xun'er relaxed a bit and said, I didn't expect you to know all this, let alone the opportunity you got to know so much about the Imperial family. Would you want this secret in the hands of the Xiao family like I do? Han Tianyao shook his head and said, I'm afraid I won't survive tomorrow if I compete with the people of the ancient tribe. Let's talk to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. What's the use of getting the Xiao family's peace? The rest is with other imperial tribes. Can I get it? So you don't have to worry about me. You should think about how to get the Xiao family's peace, rather than wasting time with me here. Upon hearing this, Xun'er nodded and sighed, alas, I have been searching for it in the Xiao family for years, but there has been no progress, and I don't know where Xiaojia has hidden it. Alright, everything that needs to be said has been said. You should also go back, otherwise the head of the Xiao family will be anxious. After all, he doesn't know that you have a Do1 level guard by your side. Han Tianyao said. Xiao Xun'er stood up and walked outside. As she approached the door, she asked, "Do you have any plans next?" "Go and see the holy city of the Gamma Empire." Xiao Xun'er nodded and walked out. After returning to Xiao's house, Xiaojia immediately came to her and asked with a smile, "Xun'er, where did you go to play today? Did you have a good time?" Uncle Xiao, Xun'er saw a big brother she had met before today and went to the Mitel auction house with him to see, so she came back late, which worried Uncle Xiao. "It's okay, as long as Xun'er is fine, otherwise Uncle won't be able to explain it to your father." "Alright, if Xun'er is fine, Uncle won't bother you," said Xiaojia. "Well, Uncle Xiao, take your time." After Xiaojia left, Lingying appeared in front of Xiao Xun'er and asked, "Miss, do you really believe what Han Tianyao said?" "Well, he doesn't need to lie to me either. Besides, what are the benefits of him lying to me? The cost of offending the ancient tribe is something he can't bear. He won't be so foolish as to do something detrimental to himself," said Xiao Xun'er. Lingying nodded upon hearing this and immediately disappeared in front of Xiao Xun'er. Chapter 10. To the Imperial Capital, change the emblem. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Xiao Xun'er left the Mitel auction hall and had some communication with Gu Ni, Han Tianyao headed towards the city gate and stayed outside the city. Han Tianyao called out Purple Cloud Wing and flew towards the sacred city. After a day and night of flight, I arrived at the holy city of Canada the next morning and looked at the magnificent city in front of me, crawling like a giant dragon. After taking a glance, Han Tianyao walked towards the city gate. After paying and asking the Alchemist Union how to get there, Han Tianyao entered the holy city and walked towards the Alchemist Union. After arriving at the Alchemist Union, Han Tianyao walked towards the inside of the Union. When he reached the door, the guard stopped him. Before the guard could say anything, Han Tianyao immediately took out the alchemist badge from his ring and handed it to the guard, saying, "Can we go in now?" The guard saw the alchemist badge in Han Tianyao's hand and immediately respectfully said, "Yes, yes, please, sir." Han Tianyao hung the badge on his chest and walked into the trade union. Once inside, a faint fragrance of medicine entered his body through his nostrils, making Han Tianyao feel a bit relaxed and happy. He looked around the magnificent hall and walked towards the front desk. After arriving at the front desk, the receptionist saw Han Tianyao wearing a first-grade alchemist badge on his chest and immediately respectfully said, "Dear alchemist, what can I do for you?" "I am here to apply for the assessment of a third-grade alchemist," said Han Tianyao. Upon hearing this, the receptionist was taken aback. She looked at the first-grade alchemist badge on Han Tianyao's chest and then at his young and handsome face. She thought that reaching the level of a first-grade alchemist at such an age would already be very impressive, but she didn't expect him to have reached the level of a third-grade alchemist. If those who have been stuck in the third-grade alchemist for half their lives knew about it, they probably wouldn't have the face to see anyone. Immediately regaining his senses, he asked, "I don't know what the alchemist's name is." Han Tianyao. "Oh, please come with me, Your Excellency Han Tianyao." He immediately brought Han Tianyao to the steward and said to him, "Lord Ott, this is Your Excellency Han Tianyao who wants to take the third-grade alchemist exam." "Well, I see. You can step back." Ott glanced at Han Tianyao with a hint of surprise in his eyes, and then said to the receptionist, "Yes, sir." The front desk lady bowed and left alone, leaving only Han Tianyao and Aot behind. "Are you going to be a third-grade alchemist?" Otto looked at Han Tianyao and asked. "Yes, I don't know what's wrong." Han Tianyao asked. "Of course not, it's just that I was surprised to see you reach the third-grade alchemist at a young age, that's why I asked this question. I hope you don't mind, Ott said. Of course not, I can understand the feelings of the senior, but when will the assessment start? Han Tianyao asked. Now, you can come with me, little friend. After saying that, Ott led Han Tianyao to a pharmacy and even sent someone to prepare 3 medicinal herbs for the 3rd grade pill, Unity Pill. After everything was ready, Ott said, Han Xiaoyu, the medicinal herbs are ready. I wish Han Xiaoyu success in refining them in advance. Thank you very much, senior. After Ott left, Han Tianyao looked at the alchemy room alone. The walls inside were all made of black rock, which could block the powerful Do Wang's full blow and absorb the energy of the alchemy explosion to prevent it from affecting others. Han Tianyao arrived at the center, took out the purple abyss cauldron, sat cross-legged, adjusted his own state, summoned a strange fire and threw it into the cauldron to start refining medicine. After a period of refining, after consuming a portion of medicinal herbs, Han Tianyao successfully refined the cohesion pill. Afterwards, Han Tianyao collected the purple yuan cauldron and tidied it up again. He walked out of the refining room with the cohesion pill in his hand. Otto saw Han Tianyao come out and welcomed him, asking, Han Xiaoyu, how was the refining process? Han Tianyao smiled and handed the pill in his hand to Aot, saying, it was successfully refined. Otto picked up the cohesive pill from Han Tianyao's hand, identified it, and smiled at him, saying, congratulations to Han Xiaoyu for officially becoming a 3rd grade alchemist. As he spoke, Otto took the 3rd grade alchemist badge and robe from someone else's hand and handed them to Han Tianyao. After Han Tianyao clasped his hands together, he looked at the medicine cauldron pattern inside the silver badge, which had 3 horizontal lines on it. He put it in the ring and handed the 1st level badge to Ott. He asked Ott, Master Ott, can I leave the 1st level robe? Alright, if Han Xiaoyu likes it, give it to him. Thank you, Master Aot. Han Tianyao arched his hand. Haha, Han Xiaoyu, I want you to meet someone with me. After he heard about you, he instructed me to take you to meet him after you finished your assessment. I wonder if you are willing to do so, Xiaoyu. Ott asked. Oh, I don't know who wants to see me. Han Tianyao thought to himself, it should be the Union President, Fa Ma, who wants to see himself. The President of the Medicine Refiners Union, Fa Ma. Upon hearing this, Han Tianyao's face immediately showed surprise and he thought to himself, sure enough. Then he said, Pharma, the President of the Medicine Refining Guild. He wants to see me. Well, yes. Master Lut leads the way, Han Tianyao said. Upon hearing this, Otto led Han Tianyao towards a reception room. Arriving at the reception room, Ott pushed open the door and walked in. Han Tianyao followed closely behind and entered the room. Han Tianyao saw an old man sitting in a seat, wearing a 5th grade alchemist robe and a purple badge on his chest. The badge had a pattern of a medicine cauldron with 2 horizontal lines on it, and he also wore a cauldron on his head. Han Tianyao looked at this strange appearance and knew that this person was the Dharma Mammoth. Before he could speak, the Dharma Mammoth on the opposite side spoke first. Han Xiaoyu, I am the president of this alchemist union, Fa Ma. I just saw that your bone age should be around 13 years old. Being able to reach the 3rd grade alchemist at such a young age is truly terrifying. Haha. Fa Ma smiled. Thank you very much for the praise from President Fa Ma, but I still have a long way to go in refining medicine, Han Tianyao said humbly. Upon hearing this, Fameo nodded and whispered, at such a young age, one should not be arrogant or impatient. If it were someone else, they would probably have been full of pride long ago. I really don't know what kind of expert could teach such an outstanding disciple. I don't know if Han Xiaoyu has any plans in the future. Would you be willing to stay in the Medicine Refiners Union? Asked Fa Ma. To be honest, I intend to experience outside and don't want to stay in just one place, so please forgive me. Han Tianyao arched his hand and said. Huh, it's okay, young people should venture outside and gain more experience. Maybe we can go further without any regrets. FAMO smiled. Thank you very much, President. What are your plans next, little friend? Asked FAMA. I want to stay in this holy city for a while, and then plan to go to the Black Horn domain to experience it, Han Tianyao replied. Oh. Little friend actually plans to go to the Black Horn domain. FAMA said in surprise. Yes, Han Tianyao replied. I don't know why you went there, but I don't know that the Black Horn domain is a place where there are no restrictions. There are countless strong and ruthless disciples there, and except for Canaan Academy, everything else is very chaotic. If you don't have strong strength, it's difficult to survive there. I wonder why you plan to go to the Black Horn domain, asked Fama. I only plan to go to the Black Horn domain for training, mainly because there are no restrictions there. I can better experience there. Only through life and death can I go further in the future. Han Tianyao said. Upon hearing this, Fameo was somewhat surprised. He didn't expect that since the young man had such enlightenment, if it were for those family members, they might not have taken the initiative to go to the Black Horn domain for training. With this in mind, Fameo looked at Han Tianyao and said, You have such thoughts, I can't say anything. I can only wish you all the best. Then I'll borrow the auspicious words from the chairman of the Dharma Mammoth. Han Tianyao smiled. Afterwards, Han Tianyao and FAMA discussed the issue of refining medicine. FAMA did not hide it and shared his own experience in refining medicine with Han Tianyao. At this point, Han Tianyao also shared some experience records about refining 6th grade pills in his notes with FAMA. FAMA also benefited greatly and immediately bowed to Han Tianyao, and Han Tianyao quickly helped him up. Afterwards, FAMA even awarded Han Tianyao the position of honorary elder of the Medicine Refiner Union. When Han Tianyao intentionally learned about the position of honorary elder and what he needed to do, he gladly accepted it. After the two of them finished chatting, they found that it was already late and learned that Han Tianyao had just arrived in the Imperial capital. They had not yet found a place to stay at the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com. Fameo gave Han Tianyao a courtyard located in the east of the Imperial capital, but Han Tianyao did not delay it and gladly accepted it. The next morning, Han Tianyao walked out of the courtyard and planned to stroll around the Imperial capital, while also taking a look at the prosperity of the capital. After staying in the Imperial capital for 5 days and strolling through the streets and alleys, Han Tianyao plans to head to the Black Horn domain in about these 3 days. As he passed by the Mytel auction house, he saw a group of people gathered around the entrance of the auction house, whispering and looking inside. Han Tianyao also curiously walked forward, only to find a few people standing in front of the auction house. Judging by their clothes, they were probably servants. In front of them stood a young man of 17 or 18 years old. There were also several people standing in front of him, including a young girl who looked only 16 or 17 years old. The girl looked young and charming, wearing a red robe. She was actually young, but her figure was remarkable. The girl's body was perfectly outlined in a red robe, and her face was filled with disgust. At this moment, the boy opposite her spoke up and asked, Yafei, as long as you marry me and become my woman, I will treat you well. You don't have to be an auctioneer in Mytel anymore, and you don't have to deal with those who have ulterior motives towards you anymore. How about that? Thank you very much for the kindness of the young master of the Mu family, but Princess Yafei has no plans to marry yet. I'm afraid she will disappoint the kindness of the young master, said the girl named Princess Yafei. Han Tianyao looked at everything in front of him and said to himself, so this girl is the Empress Dowager of the Jin dynasty, and the young man must be Mu Zhan. However, he did not step forward to meddle in his affairs, but stood in the crowd and watched. It was not until the arrival of Mount Mitten that the disturbance was quelled.